have got a bit of a roadblock or a bit of a road bump, but it shall still be the Asian century. The time of transition, it's a time of challenge, it's time for hope, it's time for a better future for the entire Asia Pacific region. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Over to this very distinguished panels to take you forward in the first part of the session. Over to you, Hema. Thank you.
Thank you, General Sharma, for your fascinating insights on the geopolitics and economics and socio-economic situation right now. Now we are heading up into our first panel discussion of the day, which is on the geopolitical risks outlook 2021. This is going to be moderated by Sushil Pradhan. Sushil Pradhan is the Chief Operating Officer of MitKat Advisory Services. He has led several risk management assignments in Myanmar, Iraq, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, difficult geographies of India. He has 22 years of military experience, from counter-terrorist operations to high-altitude warfare to deserts. He was part of the UN peacekeeping mission in Sierra Leone and has been a UN trainer for international peacekeepers in Germany as well. He is a frequent and much sought-after speaker in several influential forums such as the ACSG, OSAC, ACES forums at Dubai, Mumbai, Bangalore, etc. He always brings out a very distinctive perspective, whether it's the Dyson sphere or the COVID virus. Very interesting panel members from Singapore, Japan, Indonesia, and India that we are looking forward to. So over to you, Sushil.
Thank you so much, Hema, and thank you, General Sharma, for setting the stage right for this discussion, because it obviously takes off at a geopolitical level. And what Hema introduced me about, having spoken at various forums, I made up my mind a couple of years back that speaking takes a lot of effort, so you have to prepare for it. So it's easier to moderate because there you just have to ask the questions. So hence, in the last 2 years, you would have seen my appearance on screen or on stage only as a moderator and definitely not as a speaker, because I have such wonderful speakers on the panel here with me today. And we are going to talk about geopolitics in 2021. And as you have been already apprised, that geopolitics has undergone a transformation in the year. It's been accelerated by the pandemic, the information technology polarizations, and the waning influence of the only superpower that was the US. 3 aspects stand out. That is that the Asia Pacific region has been heavily influenced by the flexing of muscles by China, new trade alliances like the RCEP, and the increasing emergence of the Indian Ocean region as a stage for power play and drama. The second aspect is vaccine diplomacy and the geopolitical realignments forced upon us by the pandemic that have redrawn the lines of ideology, hyper-nationalism, and have made strange bedfellows. The third, of course, is how we connect, how we communicate, how we gather information from the internet, and how we socialize on in cyberspace has really now become contingent upon the geopolitics of technology. So having said that, the usual skeptics, the question would arise that how does geopolitics affect business? And 2 years, just a couple of days back, we had a recent example where, as a result of the Indian ban against Chinese apps, a huge company like ByteDance is considering downsizing in India. So while the canvas is really vast, we shall focus our discussion on this risk and security aspects, because that is the core competence of the panelists today. And we have an eminent risk and security experts to give us their viewpoints. Let me start by introducing them quickly. And guys, just raise your hand when I come around to you. So Danny is a senior consultant, Asia Pacific, Middle East and Africa. He looks after security monitoring and response, crisis management, enterprise resilience for MasterCard, and he's based out of Singapore. He's going to talk about the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, its impact on our lives tomorrow. He'll also give us an overview of the APAC region with reference to the pandemic, China's emerging influence, and maybe a little bit about the change in US government, all this in a very short while. The next is we have Glenn Gardiner. He's the President Director of Concord Consulting based out of Jakarta in Indonesia. He provides business risk consultancy supporting clients in the commercial and government sectors. He has an aviation security management qualification, and he's a graduate of the Royal Military College in Duntroon in Australia. He's going to discuss Indonesia's relationships with China, the US, and the ASEAN. Kenji is the managing director. Kenji Okamoto is the managing director of Vector Risk Management based out of Tokyo in Japan. His firm has been in the industry since 2004 and specializes in security, due diligence, risk management, mainly for very high profile multinationals. He would like to cover the geopolitical scene in Japan with the upcoming Tokyo Olympics and highlight some associated risks under COVID-19. He's going to touch upon the current status in Japan, international travel restrictions, contingencies, etc. Last but not the least, MP Sanuman started his career in the Indian Armed Forces and has worked in banking, ITS, and with brands like Cisco and Wipro. Presently, he looks after corporate security Asia Pacific for Diageo. He's an active participant in various security forums. He's been invited as a speaker in forums in Macau and Beijing, which are security related. He's going to talk about the evolving geopolitics in the APAC region and touch upon some human and business imperatives on the of the pandemic. So I'm not going to come between you and the speakers, and I would like to invite Danny to take the stage first to talk about the overall perspective of the pandemic and the geopolitical situation in the Asia Pacific. Over to you, Danny.
All right, thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. First and foremost, obviously, I'd like to thank MitKat for organizing the event, and I guess for you to attend it. Next, just the fact that I'm just going to share my own personal opinion, and that doesn't represent any of any other organizations I work for otherwise. But over the next couple of minutes, I'm just going to talk quickly on 3 points: COVID-19, the economic recession that sits behind COVID-19, and perhaps radicalization. So today I know COVID is something that is spoken about, talked about, and probably talked to death. But I'm going to be a bit more forward-looking to look at different aspects and the future aspects of COVID-19. So it was pretty telling when last Friday, right? One of the ministers in Singapore came out to officially say that the pandemic could last 4 to 5 years, right? So once again, that's 4 to 5 years, and we may actually encounter a lot more, road bumps along the way. Road bumps like, for example, the current vaccines, are not able to be effective against the South African mutated strain, right? So while the availability of the COVID-19 vaccines is going to be rather progressive, but restarting the global travel, restarting global economy is going to take a lot longer, right? So what does this mean for all of us, right? So today it doesn't matter whether you're sitting in Singapore or Pune or London or Hong Kong, you know, at least in the near immediate future, right? Things like, for example, safe distancing and wearing a mask is going to be very much a big part of our lives, right? And in a very positive scenario, right, where the world actually ends up, getting vaccinated, right, in the coming years. But unfortunately, in a worst case scenario, right, where we are always one step behind a evolving virus, where we would continuously need to take, a yearly vaccine of sorts, right? So we're not sure what the post COVID-19 was going to look like, but we're all pretty sure that we will never go back to the pre-COVID-19 days, right? So what would the future of work look like, right? So COVID-19 has, at least for the near future, right, dramatically changed both our professional lives, where a lot of us are telecommuting. For example, we're doing a lot more calls like these, on platforms like Zoom, right? And obviously our social lives is constantly changed. Like here in Singapore, right, we have pretty restrictive measures on social gatherings, more so for the Chinese New Year, which is going to roll into town in a fortnight or so, right? But as bad as COVID-19 is, as bad as how a lot of media attention is on COVID-19, a lot of us are not looking at the economic recession that is sitting behind this COVID pandemic. And last year, right, even though a lot of economists has suggested or expected a V-shaped recovery, that is looking more and more bleak, right? So in many sense of the word, right, 2021 is looking quite a lot like 2020. And the initial estimates of the impact on the pandemic, according to, for example, the Luxembourg forecast, right, has already anticipated a decline of GDP by about 6% for 2020, and perhaps 7% in 2021. Last but not least, I'm going to talk about the radicalization. So yesterday, in the news, right, in Singapore, there was a teenager who's 16 years old. So he was detained under the Internal Security Act for planning to commit terrorist acts against 2 local mosques, right? And he was planning it to execute it on the 15th of March, which is the second anniversary of 2019. So on the back of COVID-19, on the back of the economic crisis, and we should not ignore and forget the threat that we had before this, things like radicalization, right? So with that, I will hand back over to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Danny. That was really good. And I just have a quick question for you. The world feels, or at least we feel in the Asia Pacific region, that the Asia Pacific region in general has handled the pandemic much better than some of the more developed countries, whether it's in terms of containment of infections or whether it's been, the vaccination programs or reducing the fatalities. Do you agree with this? And any theory that you may throw why this is so?
Again, I'm always kind of fearful when anyone makes motherhood statements like that, where things are worse in Europe or stuff like that, because it really depends on a case-to-case basis, right? So Asia Pacific is a pretty big landmass, right? So are we talking about India, for example? Are we talking about Indonesia? Or talking about Singapore? And in fact, it gets a lot more complicated like that, because which time in Singapore for you are you referring to, right? Because if you look at Singapore, last September, for instance, it had more cases than anyone, including India, right?
Yes.
That may not be the case today, but I don't have a crystal ball, so I cannot tell you for sure, right? What would COVID-19 look like in Singapore, a month down the road? And quite frankly, no one does. And I suspect that we will go into this, continuous evolution of opening up the economy, and then closing the economy, because it's not an easy decision for the government, right? Do you open the economy and save businesses, or you close the economy and save life, right? I don't have answer to that.
That's true. Thanks, and that's very candidly put. So it's always going to be a question of lives versus livelihood. Having said that, let's come to Glenn, and Glenn is going to give us what's the perspective in Indonesia and how it's relating to the countries around. So over to you, Glenn.
Thank you, Sushil. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time today. As Sushil mentioned, I want to talk to you a little bit about Indonesia's geopolitical relationships with China, the US, and ASEAN. Now, when we're talking about Indonesia's relationship with China, the best way to describe it is it's complex and it's complicated. What we need to consider is that the continued dependence on Chinese support, development support, economic support through trade. So China is the second largest trader, or the largest trading partner, I should say, with Indonesia, and it is the second largest investment entity after Singapore. So in that respect, China is a very, very powerful player here in the support for the nation. So what does that mean? Increased influence from trade, continued trade. We will see that China maintains a significant level of input into the extractive-based industry sector here, particularly in nickel. Now, some sources state that within the mining of nickel for the EV market back in China, nearly 75% of export of Indonesian nickel goes to China. Coal is also becoming of interest. So as Australia and China's trade relationship has suffered over the past months, Indonesia is looking as a very good potential alternative to previous Australian coal. So we need to think about those types of things. In short, what does Indonesia need to do? It needs to juggle the relationship between its national interests and also the interests that it has with China through development and also through increased economic activity. So how does that play for Indonesia when we come to the question of US-Chinese rivalry within the region and also on a global footprint? So Indonesia has been very, very, very careful to ensure that it doesn't get embroiled into taking a particular side. So when there's any situation of that, they will back away from that. Certainly there is trade agreements with the Chinese, there's trade agreements with the Americans. There is a level of support from the Chinese. There's also a level of support from the Americans. So when we look at these types of things, we also need to consider, however, in some aspects, Indonesia is on a similar footing as the US with China. Indonesia specifically is not a claimant or a threat with respect to the South China Seas perspective. However, Indonesia also has to manage the incursions of Chinese fishing vessels supported by Chinese Coast Guard escorts into Indonesian territorial waters. There has been recent issues earlier this month where unidentified unmanned sea drones have been picked up in Indonesian waters, later to be confirmed as being actually manufactured within China. Does that mean that they were actually used by the Chinese government at that time? Unclear. Recently, up to a couple of days ago, we had a situation where Iranian oil vessels are actually doing sea-to-sea transfer of oil to Chinese flagged oil tankers here as well. So Indonesia's response and management for this needs to be tactful at the least. So when we look at those types of situations, we also then need to look at coronavirus and vaccine diplomacy. Right now, there are various sources that are concerned that Indonesia is getting a great deal. What is the cost? On the 13th of January, you had the Chinese Foreign Minister, Wang Li, who came to Indonesia. He met with the president, he met with his counterpart, the foreign minister, as well as several other high-ranking Indonesian officials. So in that respect, Indonesia is relying on about 140 million doses of vaccine here in this country from Sinovac. To balance that out and to address some of the concerns of various political stakeholders here, they've also signed an agreement with two other companies as well. Novavax, which is an American company, and you may recall that they were supported by the previous administration to develop a vaccine. So 50 million doses from Novavax. AstraZeneca, the British-Swedish manufacturer, pharmaceutical, will also be providing another 50 million doses. So all in all, another 100 million doses coming from those other providers. Now, when we talk about Indonesia's relationship with the US, what is US policy going to be within this region? It's up for debate and it's still very, very unclear. I think in the short term, we can see that you will have a continuance of the previous administration's policy. I think that you will see a continuance of the development of military support here, whether it be through the purchase of military equipment, because Indonesia needs to maintain and upgrade its weaponry within its defence force. Some of those items have probably not been updated for nearly 50 to 60 years. So there is a requirement for ships, there is a requirement for aircraft. But what we will continue to see is Indonesia's long-term trend of non-alignment. So even though we're looking at F-16 purchases from the United States, we're looking at Black Hawk helicopter purchases here, you'll also see French assault aircraft, the Eurofighter, and possibly Russian aircraft that will actually be making up part of the arsenal of the defence force of Indonesia. So with respects to that, there's also a consideration on to how the new administration is actually going to continue with the previous policies. So certainly we're going to see a predominance on human rights, and in that respect, In line with that, the current defence minister in Indonesia, there was a ban on his travel to the United States that was actually lifted under the Trump administration.
Glenn, I'm going to ask you to take a pause here, and we already have a question for you in the chat box, in the question and answer box. So you could review that, and we'll come back to you for that answer. In the meanwhile, I want to shift the focus to the other part of the Asia Pacific, which is Japan. And Kenji, I'll request you to give us your initial remarks, and then we'll see what sort of questions the audience has for you. But Glenn, that's a really interesting point about how Indonesia wanting to stay neutral in the middle of so much of influence from all the directions. Kenji, over to you.
Thanks so much, Soshio. Thank you very much to the organizers for this. My name is Kenji Okamoto, Managing Director of Vector Risk, a risk and risk management and security firm headquartered in Tokyo and with operations in Korea, South, just in case. Japan's unique position in Asia. So as everyone knows, Japan is strategically located in East Asia and plays an important role in the balance of power, commerce, and security in the region, especially with its neighbors, some of which have become even more assertive in recent years. Of interest would be our friends from China, Russia, and the DPRK. However, today, instead of discussing lingering and historical geopolitical risks posed by Russia and the Hokkaido or Northern Territories, the PLA's navies, maritime expansion in the South China Sea and Senkaku Island claims, and the North Korea's more recent SLBMs, which is better left to the folks in the capital to handle. I like to take it down several levels to something closer to home, especially for those who are sponsors, and that would be the 2020 and 2021 Tokyo Olympics. Okay, Tokyo Olympics. And will become a highly scrutinized event, no matter what the outcome is. The games were supposed to be held last summer, but postponed due to COVID, and after several countries advised that they could not send their athletes to Japan or called for a postponement. So just by way of background, Japan's tourism ministry was preparing for a bonanza year to attract over 40 million tourists. But then came the COVID, and that number fell to 10% last year. As of last week, the IOC and the Japanese government have reiterated once again that the games will go on in late July this year, despite re-emerging rumors that it will not. While in spirit, the Olympics may attempt to be apolitical, it remains highly politicized and used as soft power, as everyone knows. We've also seen some actors try to exploit this and pitch to have the games in their state, all in the backdrop of perceived uncertainty or weakness of the host. Nevertheless, as of now, there seems to be only two options on the table: proceed or cancel. There does not seem to be an option for another postponement, with costs ballooning by over $3 billion, now to over $15 billion, just for this one-year delay. So it's more than likely that should the Olympics be held, it will be simplified, with a capital S, of course, meaning limited spectators and fanfare. Right. Being vaccinated is not a prerequisite for athletes. Vaccines for medical professionals are only going to begin from late February this year, and the wider population may be in April or May. This has also affected recently appointed Japanese Prime Minister Suga's approval ratings, which have sunk drastically over the past few weeks due to the COVID response, the ongoing second state of emergency, and high daily infections. It is noted that late in 2020, Tokyo successfully hosted an international gymnastics meet where organizers tested a range of COVID-19 countermeasures and showed that at least on a limited scale, such events could still be held. Key takeaways and indicators. On a micro level, we're looking at monitoring daily infections trends, especially in metropolitan Tokyo. We're looking at the number of available hospital beds, percentages filled. On a macro level, of course, how other countries are doing with COVID-19 and their vaccination numbers. So China has been fortunate to celebrate their successes but will this sentiment be shared when they travel to Japan and mingle with other countries? Public sentiment in Japan and overseas. Rollout for the general population in April, maybe May, may not be swift enough. If folks don't get vaccinated or if numbers dwindle, athletes might not want to come over in the first place. Also, the pandemic has added to even more uncertainty, not only regionally, but also globally with the new Biden administration. And of course, misplaced hopes of the reset in its relationship with China. It is likely that the new administration will have more cooperation with regional allies such as India, Australia, and ASEAN. Japan, as a key US ally, will have to recalibrate its relationships to ensure that the current LDP administration remain in power against waning endorsement for the Olympics and handling of the pandemic. So contingency plans, what can you do as business managers? Monitoring rates for safe transportation, accommodation for your executives, prices, availability of resources. As some of you might know, things have inflated by 2 to 5 times over regular rates. It would also be very prudent to have your plan B and plan C's in place, strengthening your COVID-19 countermeasures, having additional resources and supplies should another state of emergency be imposed. Of course, what if DPRK starts rattling their saber like prior to the Pyeongchang Olympics in 2018? And earthquake preparedness, evacuation, and so forth. So these are all the key important points that Japan will have to face with its neighbors and the world as it seeks to shine in the spotlight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Kenji. That was really good. There's already a question in the Q&A box waiting for you. So I'll request you to go through that and address it at the end of the first round. And that was I like your opening remarks where you candidly mentioned that you work in Japan and Korea and qualified it by saying South Korea. So I think that's something which Japan always has to be on the lookout for the guys sitting north of your South Korean friends. And coming towards the broader Asia Pacific spectrum again, I'm going to take you to Sanumon, who's going to talk about a broader Asia Pacific perspective. And then we will come back to the speakers again for the specific questions that have been directed towards them. Danny, there's a question for you also in the Q&A box, so I'll request you to have a look at that. Sanumon, over to you.
Thanks, Colonel Sushil and team. So looking at the region, Asia Pacific is characterized by an array of risks that ranges from geopolitics, terrorism, natural hazards, and risks that arise from widespread socio-economic issues. But having said that, the structural properties of geopolitical events might give you an illusion of predictability and at times an illusion of control over the slow and steady movement of things. But we simply do not know how this could trigger an event of large proportion. The linear progression halts, and we have experienced this in the case of COVID-19. And if I look at all the conferences, webinar that has happened in the past, we have spoken and discussed a lot about COVID-19, how it has impacted and changed our personal, professional life, how do we operate, how drastically businesses are thinking. I'm not going to touch upon that. But there are key themes that I would like to mention here. So overall, globally, about 255 million full-time jobs have been lost. And this actually leads to a protectionist sentiment or a national sentiment, growing trends of protectionist sentiment in the areas of trade, industrial policies, and security. So countries are putting their local population first. So just to give an example, Singapore has a new rule in terms of hiring foreign employees. Oman has a new rule to replace expats with local, and there is one for Kuwait as well. Keeping aside this, if I look at the recent border dispute between India and China, which led to deterioration of relationship, spilling over into an economic fallout, led to banning of 170 Chinese apps, and called to boycott Chinese products, enhance security on Chinese imports. And finally, India's focus on independency, which led to a reduction of 13.1% of overall trade. Indian companies in China and vice versa are likely to take a hit. If you look at today's newspaper, we have TikTok, which is logging off from India. Now, this reinforced bilateral relations, not only with US, Australia, and Japan, but also with neighboring countries. Now, looking at tying up of bilateral relationship with neighboring countries, I would like to touch upon the second theme, that is vaccine supremacy. From a geopolitical perspective, drugs and vaccine for COVID-19 has become a strategic asset, one that can affect countries' place in the overall global pecking order and an object of fierce competition. In fact, powerful countries may utilize this vaccine as soft power to strengthen their diplomatic clout. So reports of German vaccine developer CureVac being tried to be acquired by US sparked an outrage in Europe, and Switzerland tasked its military to secure its vaccine. Now, we have, on the other hand, global vaccine donation, UK raising 1 billion, similarly China donating to Cambodia and other countries lined up. But could we ever imagine the first country to offer free vaccine to neighboring countries and multiple nations is India? As part of its vaccine Maitri, or as we call it, the gesture of friendship, India has donated to Bhutan, Maldives, Nepal, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Seychelles, Mauritius, and Afghanistan and Sri Lanka in pipeline. And overall, 10 million doses of free vaccine donated to be planned. Now, if you connect to these countries, you would realize when we discuss in the geopolitical context, we would have definitely connected some of these countries in the string of pearls. Now, this demand goes beyond SAARC and the subcontinent. We have commercial arrangement with Brazil, Morocco, UK and Belgium are showing interest. So is Kenya, Nigeria, and Middle East. Now, why is it so? Because, of course, it's cost effective and safe. And India is home to the largest number of FDA approved vaccine manufacturing plants outside the US, and which even otherwise caters for more than 50% of the pharma requirement. Now, vaccine to South Asian neighbor using its position as a vaccine manufacturing hub to strengthen its ties in the region and counterbalance China's rising profile and leverage its strengths for soft power enhancement. That's all for now.
Yeah, thank you, Sanoman. That's a good perspective of putting it. And I think vaccine diplomacy is something that's going to be on the top of everyone's minds in the next coming year. And as Danny said, the pandemic could go on for a few years. So we really don't know what's the end in sight and whether this is just a pause that we are looking at. And when there will be more strains, there will be more effective or ineffective vaccines. So we do have a set of questions, and I would request, in case you can answer the questions on the chat box itself, but some critical aspects may be taken on directly. And Danny, there's a question to you that how will the stance of Philippines and Indonesia impact to determine the stance in the Asia Pacific? So we also have Eric from Philippines in the next panel. So if you want, you can answer part of this and leave the rest to him to take on there. Just 1 minute per answer, please. Quick summarization, because we don't have so much time.
Right. So I've actually typed the reply, but just to verbalize it. So essentially, quite honestly, I feel that for most governments, right, the immediate tactical front, the concern is definitely going to be the COVID vaccine, right?
Right.
But unfortunately, sometimes some politicians may actually, stroke nationalism in order to divert attention away from, domestic issues. And quite frankly, there's just too many moving parts. We have a new protest on in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, right? So new boundaries is going to be tested, right? New patients is going to be tested. So
Absolutely.
quite honestly, it's quite difficult to glaze into the crystal ball to try to anticipate what, who's going to do what, more so for, certain politicians in the region, which is, quite unpredictable. Sometimes I would personally argue they may not even know what they're going to do tomorrow. So what chance do we have, sitting by the bylines to guess what they're going to do, next? Thank you.
Thanks. I think that's a very honest and sort of pragmatic answer. Glenn, there was a question, which was from somebody in Indonesia, but it's in two parts. I'll only take on the second part, which is really interesting. He says that businesses that require people traveling across the Southeast Asian region for on-site implementation and security assessments, etc., how are they going to manage in the coming times? What's your take on that?
Look, with Eric's question, right, the bottom line to business is increased cost. And in addition to that, you're going to have to negotiate with your clients and so that they understand it's going to take longer to get things done. So you're going to have to be able to make sure that you are compliant to legislation. You're going to have to be able to have your COVID management plans in regional and remote areas as well, and get into these areas. So at the end of the day, businesses need to consider the additional time and the additional cost.
Absolutely, absolutely. So business is not going to stop because of whatever is happening, and it's just a matter of taking the right precautions, putting in place the right mitigation measures, and taking the correct advice and going forward. Kenji, there was a question which you've already answered, but if you could just verbalize it in a quick 1-minute summary for the person who's asked, so that the rest of the audience can hear it from you directly.
Of course, thank you. So the question was, should Japan and South Korea take a tougher stance in ASEAN and not require US or EU intervention? I think that should be the case given the proximity of the two countries, but there is lingering historical friction between Japan and South Korea, unlikely to be resolved anytime soon. Even last couple of weeks ago, there was a dispute on the comfort women, which the Seoul court ordered Tokyo to pay. So it's going to be tough to get these two folks to sit down and tackle the CCP. Of course, U.S. and Western power intervention, I think, would be permanent and vital.
Thank you. Thanks, Kenji. And there are lots of questions in the question and answer box, but I fear that we are running a bit out of time. Sanuman, there's a recurring question that, is this vaccine diplomacy going to be leading to major geopolitics showdown in the coming times? You already did mention a bit about that, but do you think this is something that countries which are doing manufacturing vaccines on a large scale like India and China, are they going to use this to play off against each other amongst their, let's say, beneficiaries or their allies? What is your concept of this?
So I don't have a clear answer to this, but if you look at, there are, affiliations which is also playing around in terms of procurement of vaccines. So Cambodia has been donated vaccine from China, but still Cambodia has approached India to procure additional doses of vaccine. So, and now if you connect it, is it purely from their requirement mode, or is it more related to geopolitics? My answer would be it's more related to requirement, where to approach or where to lean forward, where they can get given by the sheer size of the production capacity, and of course the willingness to donate and lean in to support the neighboring countries.
Right. So thanks. That's a very concise answer, and that, like you said, there is no right or wrong, and like Danny said, that we don't have a crystal ball to look into the future. There are a lot of interesting questions that have been thrown up on the Q&A chat box, and I would require and request my esteemed panelists that can you answer those questions, especially if they relate directly to you, if they have been asked to you directly, or if it's something that is your field of expertise. So I'll request you to type out the answers in the Q&A box itself so that all of us can benefit from that. And with that, I would sort of like to close this panel today. And I would like to mention that Glenn has provided us a lot of interesting reading material about his region and the region surrounding it. We shall be circulating it to all the panelists to all the participants after the end of the seminar. Thank you, Glenn, for that. I know a lot of you who are attending. There are more than 200 of you who would like to ask more and more questions to the panelists, but I would like to actually not impinge upon the time of the next panelist. So thank you so much, Danny. Thank you so much, Glenn. Thank you, Sanuman. Thank you, Kenji, for your time and for the thought that you have given to putting your ideas together in these brief 5 or 6 minutes that we could give you to talk about. And please continue responding on the chats, because there are a whole lot of questions which are directly related to you and are within your field of expertise. So Hima, I was given the panel 5 minutes late, so I am ending only 4 minutes late. I've given you the panel back with 39 minutes of time taken up. And thank you so much. Thank you, guys. Please stay on and please keep attending.
Thanks, Sheel. Yes.
Hima, so since I have that 1 minute, I want to take 20 seconds of each of my panelists to give their closing quote. Danny, your closing quote.
Quite frankly, it's pretty simple, for all of us to stay safe because we are obviously all in this together, right? And the only way for us to get out of this is for all of us to get out of this. I mean, it's not a race, it's not a vaccine race. We are the human race, and only when we stand together will we get through this together. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a very inclusive thought. Thanks. Kenji, your
Thanks.
take?
Yes, I think that the pandemic has shown that many countries can work together really well to strive for the greater good. But of course, there will be certain actors, as usual, as always, who will try to capitalize and exploit such situations for their own agenda. So again, it's always the lingering balance of power in the region, pandemic or not, and basically we must constantly fight diligently.
Thank you. Thanks. That's very nicely put. So we must guard against people with agendas and focus on the solutions. Glenn, your closing quote for 20 seconds.
I think that certainly the pandemic is a big issue, but what we also need to look at is the consequences of the pandemic and those traditional threats that businesses had to deal with before the pandemic. They are still here, except they're going to be exacerbated because of economic hardship.
Thank you. That's very, very valuable to say that, the pandemic is here for a while. We don't know how long, but the rest of it hasn't gone away. Thank you so much. Sanuman, your closing quote, please.
I would say the geopolitical events are very dynamic in nature with multiple range of possibilities. Now, predicting an end state clearly would always remain a challenge. There is a need to monitor, calibrate, and still expect the unexpected.
Right. That's a great one. Continue to expect the unexpected. And I think on that note, Hima, finally back to you with my panel.
Thanks, Sushil.
Close. Thank you,
Yes.
guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yes, great insights that have come up in terms of the dynamic situation and the continuous evolution of opening up economy, whether it's a growing sense of protectionist attitude towards business and policy, how that's going to affect India, China, radicalization, something that's come up. Excellent points. But yes, time to close the panel discussion. We are going to head up into a demo of MitKat's indigenously developed AI-assisted risk tracking platform from one of our bright young members of our predictive risk intelligence team. Radhika Haldar is a geopolitical intelligence analyst with the MitKat PRI team, and she has studied both in India and abroad and has mainly focused on issues of global security. At present, she is based in Nepal, and today she will be demonstrating MitKat's AI-enabled risk portal. So, Radhika, if you're ready, over to you.
Thank you so much, Hima ma'am, and a very good afternoon to everyone. I indeed do have the honor of showing everyone MitKat's AI-enabled risk monitoring and tracking platform. I will try to share my screen now. Is my screen visible? Okay, I think it says host disabled participant screen sharing. Can we get that fixed?
Radhika, you can try now.
Perfect. Yes, thank you. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it is. Yes, yes.
So what you see in front of you right now is MitKat's risk tracker portal. And on the map, you will see various different pins in different colors. These pins depict risk-related events, incidents, or developments that have occurred and that have an impact or repercussion on specific client locations or presence. Now, these client locations are also mapped are also pinned onto the map, and they can be either offices or manufacturing plants, data centers, or any other sort of client presence. The intention of the map, along with these different color-coded pins, is that the colors represent different risk categories as well as risk levels. And the idea is to have a visualization of the risk-related events along or with reference to the client locations. And what this does is it enables a hyper-localized impact assessment or analysis in terms of the risk alert. The map is completely interactive, and you can zoom in to the extent possible as much as you'd like. And of course, you can hover over the pins. If you do that, what happens is a small blurb of the incident comes up, along with the distance of this particular event from the nearest client location. At the same time, the same alerts are on the left-hand side pane in this manner. And if I hover over the alerts, it takes me to where the event is on the map. So I can either click on the pin directly on the map or on one of these alerts. And an expanded version of the description of the event as well as its background will appear. What will also appear is a customized impact analysis and recommendation for the specific client requirement as per the mandate discussed with us. This information can be downloaded as a PDF over here for internal circulation as well. Moving on to some of the other features of the risk tracker portal, which are on the right-hand side. The first of these is the event archives, which lets you search through a repository of data from the last 5 years. This can be filtered according to geography, risk category, and time, and helps one do a historical or trend analysis of events. The next feature is the event calendar, which helps prepare clients for events that are likely to take place in the coming days, weeks, or months. We move on to some of the more customized and detailed reports and publications that MitKat publishes. These are in the form of advisories that are on special, special issues or topics. There are weekly and monthly reports that are published at the end of a week or a month, preparing the client again for the coming week or the coming month. Certain special reports on topics of specific interest that require in-depth research, as well as risk reviews, which give a broad overview of, ideally these are annual reviews and they give a broad overview of the coming year. I think for this audience, it would be pertinent that I show the APAC event calendar for 2021. The calendar maps out predictable events that are likely to take place in the year 2021 that may have operational risks associated to them for businesses operating in the region. The next is travel advisories. I think this is pretty self-explanatory. It consists of advisories that cover risk-related aspects specific to a particular travel itinerary. This advisory is mainly dependent on the traveler's profile, geographic coverage required, as well as the specific time and date that is shared with us in advance. The next feature of the risk tracker portal is the COVID dashboard. This is what the dashboard looks like. The one that I have open in front of me right now is the India dashboard, but a similar one can be generated for other countries as well. As you can see, it has all the important information related to COVID, as well as the implemented measures, released by the relevant nodal authorities and government agencies that can also be accessed, and the official links are also mentioned. In addition to the information related to COVID, we also have detailed reports and reviews. At the moment, the most important topic within COVID is the progress of the vaccinations, which we have been tracing, as well as movement and travel regulations. Going back to the portal, I now come to the most interesting feature, which is the Risk and Intelligence Monitoring Engine, or RIME as we call it, and it can be accessed from here. RIME looks like this, and it is an AI-assisted customizable web crawler. It crawls through the internet for risk-related information and events from mainstream media, RSS feeds of media portals, social media platforms, as well as some vernacular media. So like I said, it's a web crawler, and it has raw data, almost near real-time data. And so if I click on any one of these alerts, it takes me directly to, so this is a tweet, so it takes me directly to that particular tweet where I can obtain information for further analysis or monitoring. So RIME is an excellent platform for risk monitoring. With that, I will end my demo because I think I've taken you through the main.
Thank you. Thank you, Radhika. That was really very well done. And ladies and gentlemen, we have more than 80 clients across the world who are using our portal very effectively. And should any of you require us to give us a customized demo or a proof of case, we can run that for you. Please contact us directly, any of us, and we'll be happy to take it forward. Thank you, Radhika, for this.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Radhika. That's a very nice demo. Thanks, Neil. So I think we now head into our, before that, I must say that we have 240 participants right now from 18 countries. We're done with our the first of our 3 Power Pack panels, again featuring more than speakers from 9 countries. Heading up into our next panel discussion for the day on socio-economic risks outlook 2021 is our moderator, none other than Colonel Samrendra Kumar, co-founder and MD of MitKat Advisory Services, who always brings so much passion, besides his obvious experience and expertise in the field of security, as one of the industry's most reputed security and risk consultants. One of our foremost thought leaders, very prestigious panel lined up ahead again as well on Colonel Samrendra Kumar's panel. Sir, over to you.
So can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes. We can hear you clearly. We can see you clearly. Good to go.
So, ladies and gentlemen from 5 continents, 18 countries and 12 time zones. So thank you very much for enriching Mars 2021 with your gracious presence and with your lively participation. We can already see lots of interesting questions, and we have had an interesting keynote and a Power Pack panel and a good demonstration. So wish each one of you a very happy, healthy and hopeful 2021. Our panel shall discuss socio-economic and environmental risks outlook for 2021. We have a Power Pack panel and not in any particular order. I'll introduce the panelists. Bruce McIndoe is the founder of World Aware, a leading provider of risk intel to global organizations. He's president of McIndoe Risk Advisory currently, Masters in Computer Science from Johns Hopkins, adjunct professor at Maryland, University of Maryland. Bruce has worked with US intelligence agencies, CIA, Department of Defense, NASA, as well as private sector, been recognized as one of the top 25 most influential executives in the travel industry, and is passionate about understanding the world and its interdependencies. So Bruce, deep gratitude to you and appreciate your commitment. I know it's well past midnight Eastern time. So thank you to all friends from Americas who are joining past midnight, West Europe, West Africa. So all those who have joined despite vast time zone differences. Next, Raghav KP. Raghav is a distinguished corporate security and resiliency professional. He has over 25 years of rich experience leading teams across geographies, implementing out-of-the-box solutions. He's worked in government and private sector, across defense and aerospace, high-tech, retail, banking, and financial services industries. Raghav currently leads the physical security and enterprise resiliency function for Asia Pacific, Japan, and India regions for VMware. Professor Martin Gill. Martin, thank you for joining in so early and sorry for waking you up. And top quoted criminologist, one of the most influential fire and safety experts across the world, publisher of 14 books. I think 15th is in progress, or maybe 16th one also. Director of perpetuity research, chairs at universities of Leicester and London, is the founder of Outstanding Security Performance Awards, who are partnering us today. He's also the founder of TECAS and recipient of several awards from SIS, BSIA, winner of Imbert Prize. I can go on and on. So thank you, Martin. Great pleasure to have you for joining in so early. Eric Allendogan is the Director of Strategic Intelligence for Black Pearl Consultancy, Research and Intel arm of Business Profiles Inc. He's a trailblazer in strategic intelligence, travel security and resilience in the Philippines, as well as the Asia Pacific region. So warm welcome, Eric. So this is how we intend to progress the discussions, and I'm cognizant of the time. So I will take 2 minutes to introduce the topic and set the overall context. Then each of the panelists gets 3 minutes. So kindly restrict yourself in the opening remarks for 3 minutes. After that, I'll circle back to you for recommendations, and we will take few questions from the audience. So please type in your questions in the Q&A box. So ladies and gentlemen, 2020, needless to say, was an extraordinary year for economy, society and environment. The corona count has just crossed 100 million across the world. 2.2 million lives have been lost. The virus has completely crippled the global economy, led to the worst recession since World War II, unprecedented impact on lives and livelihoods. Working hours equal to 495 million jobs was lost in Q2 of 2020 alone. So over the near term, the most likely socio-economic and environmental risks pertain to unemployment, livelihood crisis, widespread youth disillusionment, rising societal and digital inequality, economic stagnation, human-made environmental damage, erosion of social cohesion, crime, terror, etc. Climate change and extreme weather events, to which no one is immune, of course, continues to pose a catastrophic risk. Cybersecurity, online frauds, disinformation, privacy issues, these will continue to dominate the risk agenda as well. Now the good news is that finally the global economy is rebounding strongly. So global economy, after about -4% last year degrowth, this year will grow at about 4.5%. And as per IHS market, and later we will have Rajiv Biswas, the chief economist of IHS market for Asia Pacific, joining us as a special keynote. So Asia will probably grow at 4.5%, and China will, 5.7%. World will grow at 4.5, Asia at 5.7. China will grow at about 7.5 and India at about 8.9%. Vaccination has begun, but so have the hiccups.
Yes. Hello.
Yeah, can we request everyone to go on mute, please? Also, the vaccination has begun, so have the hiccups. It seems that the Moderna vaccine is not effective against the South African, strain. So global travel may not resume in a hurry, and even as the local travel resumes. So countries which have some more of external dependence, like Thailand, Indonesia, and all, probably will take longer to recover. And I will leave Raghav to probably cover that. So vaccine manufacturers can, as of now, make sufficient dose for about 1/3 of global population before the end of 2021. So the focus is now firmly shifting to distribution, the challenges of shipping, storing, freezing, communicating, and vaccinating, as well as of ensuring equitable access, reducing unhealthy competition, keeping the R&D going so that we can have a single dose temperature stable vaccine and vaccine for all the other strains, and logistics, as well as regulations, so that these can be delivered across the world. So to make sense of all this, I can go on and on, but we have got a very expert panel. And so to make sense of this all and its profound implications for business, let me go to the panel. First, let me come to you, Bruce. Whatever happens in the US, Bruce, is of great interest to everyone else in the world. So we now have a new president, of course, who is presiding over the old America. So the undercurrents which brought Mr. Trump to power and had 74 million voting for him, they still remain alive. So I think virus, disunity, and economy would have to be probably addressed on priority. So from your vantage point, Bruce, can you give us a sense of the top few socio-economic risks which we're likely to face in 2021? And in particular, if you can just focus on how does US plan to pivot away from Trumpism amidst this twin crisis of a virus as well as economy? And how do you see the trajectory of the pandemic? And then since you know a lot, any thoughts on deglobalization or globalization 2.0, rise of China, role of technology, or many other things which you have to share? But unfortunately, you have only 3 minutes. So all yours.
Yeah, exactly. 3 minutes. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to really hit on 3 points in 3 minutes. One is the future of Trumpism in the United States. And then the two major drivers for socioeconomic challenges, of course, are the pandemic and the economic recovery and what that looks like. So let's start with the future of Trumpism. Trumpism is a product of issues, systemic issues the United States has had really for a significant period of time. It's been driven by the rise of minorities, right? So immigrant country, and offsetting the power of the white historical, European that came to the United States. Of course, this income inequality between the haves and the have-nots, which is a driver for any disruption in nation states. And of course, with this feeling that a number of citizens, the 74 million that you have referred to, being left behind. So these roots are there, and they've been manifested really since the 70s. So this is not going away, right, in any period of time until those underlying systemic issues are addressed. And fortunately, in the new administration, these issues of income inequality and racialization and bringing the country together is really the critical long-term solution to this, but it is long-term. Underlying this, of course, right now with the new administration is the pandemic, which we're all dealing with. The mishandling of the COVID-19 pandemic in the United States has been epic in its proportions. And that has been very difficult for the country and for our economy and for our partners. We represent a quarter of the deaths throughout the globe, in the United States. So So this is a huge issue where we screamed through 425,000 deaths. That's, essentially the second deadliest issue for the United States since the 1918 flu, which we saw about 675,000 people die. We're right now on track to have another 200,000 to 300,000 deaths in the next 90 to 120 days. If we hit those numbers, we will see more deaths than in World War II, which is the bloodiest war in human history. So this is really of epic proportions. So until we change the trajectory on this and we can give up on suppression, it's helpful, yes, and people need to do it, which we were very mixed. But the vaccine program getting to 75, 80, 85% is what's going to knock it down, and that's the challenge. So we're really looking at another year of this and potentially longer for all the things that your panelists have talked about before. And finally, the road to economic recovery is really, we may see no to low growth, 0 to 4% in the United States in 2021, based on how well we handle these challenges that I just talked about. But it's really going to take 2 to 3 years to get back on our feet in a number of segments like transportation, hospitality, and other areas. And so global trade is a major issue for us, obviously with the tension between the US and China. With Biden is now going to re-engage on the world stage, so we'll see more visibility of the US in issues, whether that's helpful or not, we'll see. And the biggest issue that I see around the economic recovery is the rapid deployment now of digitalization, robotics, and AI. Where I think it was the World Economic Forum talked about losing 85 million jobs to robots and AI in the next 4 years by 2025. We're seeing a rapid acceleration of that because of the pandemic, replacing those jobs now out of necessity for businesses. So that's my summary.
So thank you very much, Bruce. You finished in time and you covered a lot. So fascinating. Thank you very much. Raghav, next to you. Asia is where the virus originated, and looks like General Sharma mentioned in his opening remarks that looks like Asia will come out of it first. So Asia seems to be on a robust recovery path, though some concerns remain. I want you to cover 3 aspects. Firstly, where is the APJ region on the COVID recovery and return to normalcy curve? Second, can you give us a sense of the top socio-economic and environmental risks which impact businesses in Asia Pacific? And third is 2 themes related to your industry, particularly. I know the views are your personal. First is digital transformation, which has been accompanied by a lot of cyber risks. So digital transformation has been hastened, and so have cybersecurity risks grown exponentially. So and second is along with the risk of disinformation and fake news, which is coming up. So would you like to take up these 3 themes? One is the COVID recovery, the top risks in Asia Pacific, and third is the digital related risks, social media risks, disinformation, fake news, cybersecurity.
Sure. Thanks, Colonel Sam, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you are in the world. So on the APJ, I think was the first to get in, as some of the elite panelists and the keynote speaker have talked about, and also I think the first to rebound back also, I think faster than the other parts of the globe. But the main concern right now is that the resurgence of COVID in many of the countries across the globe, and APJ is not an exception to that. And as you all know, much of the global economic production is organized around the complex system of interdependent supply chains. And these supply chains facilitate the production of everything from computers and cars to life-saving medicines and food, and support world trade in goods that is worth almost $20 trillion annually. But questions about the supply chain risks and resilience are now being raised in the context of the global COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the acute weather events which continue to happen along with the pandemic. And in the pandemic, some of the smaller enterprises are hit harder than the other bigger ones. And many industries like the traditional retail, restaurants, hospitality, will unlikely return to normal time soon. And the longer the people stay out of jobs, the more their skills gets jaded and it's more difficult for them to return to work or the mainstream. The pandemic is also likely to result in a generation of pandemials, if I can call that, who are at the risk of being a lost generation as COVID impacts education and job opportunities. Youth disillusionment, which Colonel Sam mentioned, plus the social media can trigger protests. And the peaceful protests can be hijacked by subversive elements, which happened in the farmer protests in Delhi on the India's Republic Day. Coming to the countries and their in the APJ and the way they are on the curve. So while China and India are recovering well from the pandemic, Indonesia may have a slightly slower recovery. Singapore, Vietnam, Taipei, and Thailand are kind of controlled and pretty okay at this point in time. And some small countries like Sri Lanka are really a good success story here. And those countries with the most domestic travel are likely to rebound faster, like example, the India, China, Japan, and Australia. And those with higher international travel like Thailand and Bali, Indonesia, etc., may take a little longer. So travel bubbles and specific requirements in terms of vaccine certificates may be imposed in the future. And pre-testing, testing on arrival, and mandatory quarantine may continue to be the norm in the near future. As again, some of the esteemed panelists did mention that the Moderna vaccine is not effective against the South Africa strain. And I'm also unsure about the long-term effects of the vaccines. Though it will be likely necessary for the majority of the world to be vaccinated in order for us to return to a semblance of normality. And this might take some time. All in all, APJ region will rebound faster, but the risks remain. On the second aspect of the economic consequences of the digital transformation and the cyber attacks related to that, the cumulative data lost due to data breaches runs to upwards of $6 trillion, which is greater than the annual GDP of Japan and more than the cumulative GDP of the BRICS countries less China. Nearly 40% of the average total cost of data breach stem from lost businesses. And ransomware costs can also be significant. According to a report, the global average to remediate a successful ransomware attack is $733,000 for organizations that don't pay the ransom, and raising almost to double up to $1.5 million for organizations that do pay. I can go on, and there is so much data available in public domain, but let me take the other part, that is the disinformation and the fake news. As digital tools become more advanced, individuals with limited technical skills can create and spread manipulated information with the use of tools that use artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language generation to create social media bots, to influence public opinion, create fake reviews and deep fakes, and thus influence the minds of people on various national, international events, stock markets, etc., through the use of disinformation. This can result in brand and reputational damage to companies, loss of public trust, and financial losses. It is also very hard for companies to stop and fight back such disinformation attacks. A few examples of the disinformation and fake news influencing significant protests in the APJ region and India could be the Hong Kong, Thailand, the CAA and farmer protests in India that we are seeing, the farmer protests that we are seeing in India currently. To finally sum it up, like everything else, social media has its ills, but its potential for positive use cases far exceeds the disinformation and the fake news concerns. We in the security and risk fraternity have to take the lead in the fight against the disinformation and the fake news. Back to you, Sam.
So thank you, Raghav, for that double optimistic note, on the Asia kind of going up the growth trajectory as well as social media being a force for good. So thank you very much. So Professor Martin Gill, I'm tempted to ask you a lot of questions and probably I will have a longer discussion with you later. But, for now, you've only 3 minutes. So just want to take a couple of themes which are closer to your heart. One is that socioeconomic challenges abound in these times. And then the big issue is that inequality is rising globally. I mean, if you see USA's top 651 billionaires, they got richer by 30%. And India's 11 billionaires got richer by 35% during this. And just the amount of money that they made can fund India's healthcare program for 10 years. So that's kind of this. Unemployment remains high and a lot of statistics has been thrown around. And then the longer people stay out of work, and 85 million jobs, Bruce said, are vanishing much faster than expected. And as Raghav said, the longer they stay out of work, the more difficult. So I have got a specific question for you. The current generation of youth lack adequate pathways, I think, to future opportunities. So is the risk of youth disillusionment And their loss of faith in the political and economic institutions, I mean, real? Is it a real threat? Second is, do you see from your vantage point, how do you see the risk of loss of social cohesion, crime, right-wing nationalism, terrorism? All these things are kind of become very hot in Europe these days. And then thirdly, how is the COVID trajectory in Europe, UK and all? Because there's a lot of concern. That seems to be the new hotspot, along with the third wave seems to be more lethal. And then there are new strains coming up all the time. So, and would you like to make some bold predictions on the socio-economic issues, crime, terror-related issues? So that's just a jumble of themes. So if you can just declutter for us in 3 minutes.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. Well, I very much agree with Bruce, and if you're a criminologist and you're teaching courses on crime, when you begin to explain the causes of social unrest, you very, very, very quickly get to issues of disadvantage, to inequalities, and to blocked opportunities. I mean, these are the early lectures you give on why why social unrest occurs. So there's nothing particularly surprising about the likelihood of that happening in a world characterized by unrest. I think one of the things we do have to recognize, and I'm a criminologist, and so I go into prisons and I speak to offenders and I get their side of the story. You know, one of the things that criminals like, and this is true across the world, is easy opportunities. And easy opportunities are characterized by chaos. You know, another theory of criminology is rather than ask why people commit crime, is ask why they don't. And it's perhaps tempting in this environment to ask, most people lose from COVID-19. It's been a worldwide loser for all the reasons that have been discussed today. But for one group, organized criminals, chaos creates opportunities. So we need to be aware of, when we're talking about crime, not just the fact that, and the very important aspects, that there is social unrest, inequalities that are being manifestly obvious and exposed, that are going to lead to all sorts of concerns. There is the isolations that's occurred and the mental health issues that are going to result from the trauma that people have gone through. And on top of that, you've got the crime world. And it's tempting to think that it might have gone away just because it hasn't been seen very much. But what you learn about criminals is that they're always, particularly the organized, the professional, the repetitive, the ones that commit crimes continually, they're always looking for opportunities. And one of the things that strikes me about going into prison to speaking to them is, you know, one of the things they're good at, crime. And in prisons, they're sharing ideas. They're sharing ways of committing things. They're looking at the new opportunities. They're talking about how they got caught and ways of getting around them. So the reason I put this on the agenda is because I think it's tempting to highlight the fact there are inequalities and social unrest, and important though that is, the bit I don't want to lose sight of is this other risk, this organized crime world that is growing, manifesting, and finding new ways of working much faster than one can imagine. You know, I was very, very quickly, I was in prison, I have to say, just for the day. I get out at the end of the day, talking to some offenders. And one of the guys caught me afterwards and he said, you know, one of the strange things about the outside world, he said, on the outside world, he said, I'm in prison for a crime I didn't commit. They always say that. He said, but on the outside world, I was responsible for helping my company to protect against crime. And, you know, the company wasn't really interested. It was interested in making profits. It wasn't interested in protecting against crime. And then I come into prison and everyone's sharing ideas. Who are the easy victims? What are the best ways of committing offences? How do you avoid getting caught? So to answer your question, I do think that there's a need for politicians worldwide to recognise the dangers of inequality, and Bruce covered that rather well. The blocked opportunities for youth is a serious one, and it's not going to be an easy solution either. And COVID-19 in Europe, we're in a second wave at the moment, and it's worse than the first one. Deaths are higher, restrictions are higher, hospitalizations are higher. So we brace ourselves and look towards Asia for ways out of this. As the previous speakers have said, you're going to go first. So we take the opportunity to learn from you.
So thank you very much. Absolutely fascinating. There are already a lot of questions for you. So probably you can see the Q&A box. I think there is a question from Ishita Singh. With the persistence of COVID-19, to what extent and in what manner do we see radicalization modifying? So we'll come to you in probably in a minute. And probably there are some other questions, so probably you can take 2-3 of them together in the Q&A box. So let me first go to Eric. So we want to get everybody's opening remarks first. Eric, just 2 quick ones. One is that the environmental risks and extreme weather events, that's a problem which is here to stay. And the problem is here. It's not there in the future. So last 6 years have been the warmest ever, and 2020 was the warmest ever, despite the lockdowns and everything else. And then while the world is still battling pandemic and the US have not recovered, the Philippines has already faced 5 strong typhoons within 3 weeks, leading to worsening of an already worsened situation. So how do you deal with this triple whammy of health, economy, and environmental fury? The second thing is, on a more optimistic note, I think the Philippines government has done pretty well, has had some relative success against long-running insurgencies. And that may actually kind of provide a template to other Asian countries. So, so would you like to take up these 2 themes? And then your 3 minutes starts now. And then
sure, thank you very much. Yeah, so as you have actually mentioned, first of all, I would like to thank MitKat for having me on this particular panel discussion. So for my theme, I'll be talking about 2 types of disasters, which is very common in the Asia Pacific region, particularly in the Philippines. So for 2020, what we could see is that it brought up not only it brought about a lot of issues, particularly when we talk about perfect storms. So perfect storms are basically events or disasters that was magnified further by the presence of another disaster. So Philippines being the beacon of all disasters in the Asia Pacific region, I think this has opened up so many vulnerabilities, particularly in both private and public sector. So, and because of that, it also created, or presented way for us to be able to reevaluate our existing policies and systems. So you mentioned earlier, yes, we've actually experienced 5 strong typhoons last year, and causing massive floodings in the eastern part of the Philippines, which is already economically affected by massive local lockdowns. As you may already heard, Philippines happened to have one of the world's longest lockdown during last year because of the rising number of COVID-19 cases in my country. Although the COVID-19 related regulations and lockdowns were very important in containing the pandemic, I think our government also failed to take in account other existing factors such as disasters, which are very common in the Philippines. So the impact of these disasters were actually magnified several folds, and it escalated on unemployment rates and massive business closures. When we talk about typhoon affected communities, they've become very reliant in relief aids. But at the same time, because of the existing lockdowns, it caused it to be more difficult and even inaccessible. So when we also talk about restoring transportation and basic utilities, we saw a lot of inefficiencies, and also consequently caused massive disruptions against already struggling businesses, particularly when it comes to disaster response and business continuity measures. So these are basically what we saw opened our eyes when we talk about perfect storms, which is also, we think, is also relevant in the Asia Pacific region. On the other hand, the Philippines is currently winning its battle against another disaster, which is the New People's Army of the Communist Party. The NPA is actually coined as the Asia's longest running armed insurgency and the world's oldest existing communist rebellion. It has gone through 7 presidencies, 40 rounds of peace talks, and around 50,000 related casualties for more than 52 years. However, and that's why NPA has become the country's biggest business and security threat compared to its extremist counterpart in southern Philippines. The current administration is actually very serious in putting the end to the group before its term ends in 2022. So what the current administration did, having a populist leader, was first declaring the group as a terrorist organization. Through this, it effectively subdued, community support as well as grassroots and legal front recruitments. They've also empowered military officials by appointing them into key minister positions. and then even extending martial law in Mindanao years after the Marawi city siege, just for them to be able to mobilize NPA movements. There are also several, factors that they've put in, but I just wanted to highlight two more, which is basically understanding the economic background or context as one of the driving force for the radicalization or the proliferation of NPA. And then at the same time, adoption of anti-terrorism law, which is quite controversial in the Philippines, simply because it allowed the government to cut off or paralyze the financial machineries of the organization, which is the lifeblood of the group. So far we saw a massive drop of NPA strengths and activities, more than compared to previous administration. So yeah, back to you, Sam.
So thank you very much. We're running slightly behind time. So what we'll do is, my esteemed panelists, there are a lot of questions in the box. So I can pick up there a couple of questions for Bruce and a couple of questions for Martin. Martin, I think let me go to you first, because there are a couple of questions on this. And if you have any other recommendation measures, you can put that. The first, there was one question from Ishita Singh, which you would have probably seen. And there is another one, which is like during this pandemic times, the uber rich and the criminals have got richer. So this seems to be a good time for the uber rich and the criminals. So any thoughts of the professor on that?
Well, I mean, I would say one of the interesting things about the world of crime is generally a time when criminals are going to change the way they behave. And just like in the legitimate world, there are those that are thriving. So too it's the case in the crime world. And in the crime world, when people start thriving, it feeds other types of crime. And one of the interesting things is that, of course, all this move online as people have worked from home has created a massive opportunity. There are companies that are not used to protecting people from home. People aren't used to security working from home. They're in environments where they're open to suggestions, open to ideas. This does not get better for the world of crime. So, and even in the physical world, I was speaking recently to some shoplifters, a group of shoplifters, prolific shoplifters. And I said, isn't it bad for you? Isn't it difficult to go shoplifting these days with the restrictions of the number in stores? They said, oh, no. The fact you've got to wear a mask makes it much easier now. We can hide our identity with officially. And this is the point, you see. This is the point, that the world of crime is thriving. It's not being talked about so much. It's not being seen so much, but behind the scenes. And the trouble with things like fraud and cybercrime is often we don't find out till later that a crime's taken place. And that's one of the things that fraudsters say to me. The great thing about fraud, if you're a fraudster, is I take the money now, but you don't find out till later, particularly company frauds.
So I'll just can you just take another follow-up question quickly from Ishita Singh? She says that with the persistence of COVID-19, to what extent and in what manner do you see radicalization modifying? Can you answer in 30 seconds?
Yeah, well, I mean, just remember, the general point I would make, and it's a complex question, is this. When there is unease, when there is social unrest, these sort of things breed. And one of your previous speakers in this panel has already mentioned that. And we shouldn't be surprised if it provides the opportunity. And it takes leaders to recognize it and respond authoritatively and engagingly to bring people on board and make them aware. The most powerful crime prevention measure available is public awareness and public outrage and public response. And it's a matter of generating that in a meaningful way.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you very much. Bruce, couple of questions for you. You may have seen them. Please share your valuable insight in the latest risk forecasting tools used in the US and various advanced mitigation measures deployed in US and other countries pertaining to COVID and US versus China scenario. So there are a lot of questions which somebody wants to ask. And there is another one, which is my question to Bruce McIndoe. Even after the beginning of the term of the new president, Trumpism is said to be a new political ideology. So which could, do something. And this seems to be affecting the economy too. How are the mindsets influenced by Trumpism going to affect corporates all around the world? So lots of complex questions, but you have about a minute to answer all of it.
1 minute, all right. Trumpism the result of that is a demand for inward focus for the US. And we saw that in the last 4 years and the level of disengagement on the global stage. So if that persists and there is a greater move toward Trumpism, then I think the global stage will be much more unsettled, and adversaries and others, the criminals, as Martin may refer, to that mentality, will rise. And so that will create a lot of global challenges for any companies that are operating. And also, I think it would damage our economy and cause those follow-on issues. So, my hope is that Biden and the things that he's doing around, $1.9 trillion for the economy, getting this virus under control in the U.S., all of these things should strengthen the U.S., which will be a positive influence across the globe. So that's kind of the major issue. And multinationals, of course, are multinational. So the U.S. may be their foundation and one of their major markets, but they will adapt to the changing political landscape and the rise and fall of nations. And I think the biggest challenge for the globe, besides climate change and those things, will be India, China, the US, and how we all rise and share this planet and share the riches together. And I hope we will see our way through to the happy end.
So thank you very much. And Raghav, if you can take the question from Dushyant, the basic thing is cybersecurity going to play a leading role? How much as a part of your job as Chief Security Officer, you're very towards technology and cyber?
Yeah, I think there is going to be, there's always been a convergence between the cyber and the physical security because of the increasing digitization, and that's going to continue. And it all depends upon the kind of industry that you are in. If you're in a more, if you're in a manufacturing industry or any other industry which is more labor intensive, probably the physical security would be still leading the way. But if it is a software company or niche software companies, then probably the digital security team or the cyber security team would be having an upper hand. But I think it's each of them have their roles cut out, and each of them has to coexist, and it cannot be, especially as long as there are people, the physical security will have its relevance, is my take on it. And also, I think on the aspect of how the security industry is going to shape up, in my opinion, personal opinion, is that it's going to be more value adding and a very highly skilled workforce versus somebody. Today, if you see, most of them are semi-skilled or unskilled. So at least we are moved to semi-skilled or skilled. It will be highly skilled, and value adding professionals would be the need of the hour, is my take.
So very quickly, I would have loved to go on and on, but I think we started slightly late, and I would still like to finish, say a few minutes for the next panel. So there are a lot of comments and questions. So I request the panelists to take the questions. There are very nice comments by Jack, who wants, Jack Blackburn wants that, we should not politicize probably the vaccines. We should kind of keep it, focus on healthcare. There are comments by Nisar Gundagi, and there are lots of questions. There are also lots of, queries regarding, we want to see a platform demo. So please contact Sushil Pradhan, and his number will be in the chat box. So you can contact him. And there are lots and I would have loved to come to Eric also for comments, but Eric, instead of that, I will just thank you and Professor Martin for your organizations supporting us. And I'll go back to each of the panelists for your last 20 seconds, one soundbite each, and we'll start with Bruce.
I think I had a bit of my closing remarks in my other section there, but
say 45 seconds, you can do that.
Yeah, it's we're in an unsettled world. There's no question right now. We have some bigger issues, systemic issues globally. So my hope is that with the new administration in the U.S., there'll be more energy to focus on global governance and global issues, work on inequality. If we don't work on these systemic underlying issues, we will never get to a good place.
So all the three things you have to work on. So very quickly, if you can list all the three pillars of your strategy.
Well, clearly right now it's the pandemic and resolving that globally, not just in wealthy developed countries, or what'll never go away, which it may not anyway, but at least it'll be managed like polio or anything else. Number two, economic inequality globally and racial injustice in globally, these issues. But the bigger one is if we don't get our hands on climate change, we may not have to worry. So we've got to get moving and really heal this planet.
Thank you. Raghav, any quick closing comments, your sound bites?
Yeah, so to me, it says every crisis is an opportunity, never waste a crisis, and make the best use of it for you as an individual, professional, and all overall as a society.
Thank you very much. And Professor, anything from you?
What history?
You can answer them individually.
What history teaches us about crime risks and all type of risks is that when you understand them and you come together to work engagingly, they can be solved. And this is a major crisis, but it's true, it's a major opportunity. And I think both the previous panelists have summed up brilliantly both the need to come together. That's the only way, and there's never been a more important time for it. Let's hope the world challenge responds appropriately.
Thank you. Eric, any quick closing comments?
For me, I think I just want to reiterate that the pandemic definitely triggered a global paradigm shift. Basically, businesses, public sectors have redefined how they conduct their businesses and, their plans. Though it revealed, unforeseen vulnerabilities, but I think at the same time, it also presented a lot of opportunities that would allow us to move forward for 2021.
So thank you very much. We have had a fascinating panel. Thank you, Bruce, for outlining the 3 pillars of the strategy for the new administration. Thank you, Raghav, for covering the whole APJ picture in 3 minutes, and Professor Martin for getting us into the mind of criminals, and then for re-emphasizing that the new problems are here, the old ones are not going away, and something which Glenn also referred to in the previous panel. And then thank you for the fascinating insights from Philippines and on the environmental and insurgency issues. So I think all in all, I think we have had a fascinating discussion. So big thank you. And I will see you in 40 minutes. Hima, I have taken less than my 40 allotted minutes. So back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Sam. In the interests of keeping in time now, we'll head straight on into our next panel discussion on technology risks 2021. This panel is going to be moderated by Pavan. Needs no introduction. I've already introduced him earlier. And so, Pavan, right over to you.
Thanks a lot. Welcome once again to everyone. I think for some time, actually, the discussions were so fascinating. I forgot that I have to moderate a panel. Actually, I was listening, and suddenly I realized that I have to moderate this panel. Notwithstanding that, I think a great session till now. We have arrays of discussions on so many different dimensions which have been spoken about. I think we deliberately kept the best for the last. On that, and we have one of the most dynamic, I think, panel in terms of the diversity. We have entrepreneur who nurtures entrepreneurs. We have cybersecurity experts. We have resilience experts. We have security operations people. We have people on security infrastructure. So it's a very, very vast. And we are going to talk more about the technology aspect of this. When the topic was given, it was about the technology risk, but I would like to say that technology is an enabler. It is not a risk. I don't think so we can run this whole world or any organization without technology. It's only that the fallout of that, we have to mitigate those issues on that. And that is what we are going to discuss today. For me to just to set the context, firstly, I'd like to introduce the panel in very, very briefly. Because most of them are very, very well-known people, starting with William from Datuk. William from, you can just raise your hand, Datuk. Yeah, I think from Malaysia, astute entrepreneur. I think he's the guy who nurtures lots of entrepreneurs and young professionals across the region. He is also one of the key guys for Enterprise Asia. And the lots of awards have been given to nurturing and budding entrepreneurs. So actually, he's the guy, and he is going to talk more about the business side of it, where we have security people. He's going to talk about how the entrepreneur mindset works and how the technology is going to be critical for us. Secondly, we have Paul Rechmadi. Paul, yes, I think he's a poster boy of security in Asia Pacific region. I think most of you know him very well. He has been with banking, Diageo, Merrill Lynch, and now run his own successful company called SRS. And thank you for partnering with us. He is the deputy CEO and managing partner. He has seen security from all the sides, from the user side as well as the service provider side. So insight will be really, really helpful. We have Henry. From great, I think Henry again, astute professional on risk resiliency, business continuity and crisis management. Runs BCI chairman at BCI, BCP Asia. He is also a member of UN ISDR, which is a public-private partnership for disaster management. So I think great expertise on crisis management, cyber resiliency. Great. So we are look forward for your inputs on those domains. And last but not least, we have Dex Yuan with us. Again, a security professional with more than 2 decades of experience, has been an advisory board, is an advisory board of multiple ACES chapters. He comes with a very different background of managing infrastructure-related projects, so security technology, implementation of projects, and all those. So we are going to discuss about all those things which we are going to have in future. So with that, I just want to set a context for 30 seconds. So in terms of technology, I see there are 4 or 5 pointers which all of us needs to look for, and that is where the future is going to be. One is the rollout of 5G is going to happen in most of the countries. 2021, 2022, it is going to happen. As soon as that happens, we are going to have flooding of IoT devices which are going to get connected to our networks, to our security networks. The way we do patrolling, way we do security is going to drastically change. So millions and billions of they are going to add. So there will not be any network anymore. So it is going to be everywhere and everywhere kind of a thing. Pandemic has shown us that we were going everything for biometrics and touch, all those biometrics. Now low touch and no touch economy is coming up, so that is going to be a new wave. And that how do we handle that? Cybersecurity is going to be the underlying pillar, because that is what is going to determine, do we really, it can actually wipe off the entire existence of companies. So that is going to be a key this thing. And one more interesting aspect is going to be the balance between convenience. So when we connect and integrate more, it is going to be convenience. So the balance between convenience and privacy, which is going to be always a discussion point, which is there. So these are 4 or 5 areas which I feel is going to drive our technology, what we are going to have. So I would like to start with William, Dr. William, on your views on how do you see pandemic as an opportunity, and how does future looks like for entrepreneurs and security domain per se? Your thoughts, please.
Yep. Thank you very much, Pawan, and Susha, you've been very kind with your introduction. Not coming from a security background and being the odd man out today. Today's session has been really a very intensive learning experience for myself. Learned a lot of things from my fellow panelists. And unlike my other fellow panelists who are highly experienced enterprise risk consultants, I come from an entrepreneurial background. Enterprise Asia, the organization that I founded, has about 2,000 members across Asia. So my perspective today would be on the unique intersection of technology and the pandemic. As you have said earlier, Pawan, today we are seeing the advent of 5G, which in itself will uplift IoT or Internet of Things like never before. So there are 2 points I would like to make today, given the short time that I have. The first is that technology is no longer an enabler, but is now an essential infrastructure for businesses. As such, continuous investment in robust, secure, and scalable technology is just as important for corporate sustainability. Think about it, before pandemic or BP, what was the most important to business and trade? Of course, it is our connectivity, the roads, the highways, the maritime routes, the airlines, and the airports. But after pandemic or AP, no business can exist today without technology. Not the multinational companies, not the small and medium enterprises, and not even the roadside store owners. One example that comes in mind is this company called Grab. I'm not sure if anyone in the audience today are from Grab, but if we do, I welcome any feedback or correction. But as many of you are aware, Grab started off in Malaysia as a taxi hailing service before going regional and relocating its HQ to Singapore. It has gone far from its initial services. Today, it is the leading ride-hailing app in the region, the leader in food ordering and delivery, and increasingly the leading payment app as well. When the COVID-19 hit, the company's ride-hailing services were almost crippled. Nobody in their right frame of mind would want to use someone else's car if they can avoid it, of course. Its payment services has also been also suffered because payment take place prior to the pandemic in physical stores, right? In supermarkets, in shops, and in petrol stations. You can't do that during the pandemic. But because Grab already has a robust IT infrastructure, it was able to pivot very quickly, and that is my point. It doubled down on its food delivery business, reallocated drivers who exclusively move passengers to now also move food and groceries. And more importantly, as its payment services suffered, it saw the potential of providing microloans to small businesses and quickly pivoted to offer that as well. So as a result, the company has just announced that their business not only has not been impacted by the pandemic, but has actually gone up by 70%. Would this pivot been possible had the company not invested substantially in technology? They were able to change their model overnight, not because of the people or product that they have, but because it is backed by the strong technology infrastructure. So that was my first point, that technology is no longer just an enabler, but a critical piece of business infrastructure. And it doesn't matter what job function you're in, this is something that is very important moving forward. The second point that I want to make is to challenge the notion that technology will render physical security irrelevant. So I give some thoughts to it early on as I listened to the other speakers. And I heard earlier someone mention how physical security, man on the ground, is still the most effective and cost efficient, especially in countries where wages are still relatively low, right? Like in India, Indonesia, and the Philippines. But I want to share a slightly different angle to collaborate the continued importance of physical security. If you look at some of the changes we are seeing during the pandemic, event is one of them, right? Exhibitions and conferences are now held online, like the one we are all going through right now. But by and large, the feedback is that while online events are successful, like the one that we have today, people still prefer physical, at least a hybrid event, because nothing beats the confidence of dealing with new client or supplier face-to-face, and how messages are better magnified and sink in when you're seeing and hearing the speaker live and in person rather than via Zoom or Skype like we are doing today. And despite the growth of WhatsApp and Signal and Telegram, and of course Zoom, there is now a counter movement against technology. One good example is an up-and-coming app called Clubhouse. If you're not aware or have never heard of it, this startup that is based out of California is now valued at $1 billion US. And this is before it is even commercialized. It's not even available to the public, and it is still at its beta stage. And what makes this startup now the hottest and most talked about app is because it is doing the reverse of what other apps are doing. When you WhatsApp, you are texting. Same goes with Signal and Telegram. But Clubhouse, on the other hand, is voice only, meaning that you speak into your phone and you listen to the other conversation response on voice. You cannot type anything. Text is banned on Clubhouse. The reason for that is because as technology grows, it has become more impersonal. Imagine if you rely 100% on visa forms. You ask a question like, are you a terrorist on a form? How many people are going to answer yes, right? Everybody will say no. That is why you still need a man or woman on the ground to interview people who pass through your immigration, because it is so much easier to lie on a piece of paper, but a lot tougher to do so in an interrogation. There's the same principle behind Clubhouse. Voice is more authentic, more human. And that summarizes why I think physical events are still going to be essential, why physical presence is still very important, and therefore why physical security is still relevant despite of, or rather because of the growth of technology. So that was my second point. I think I've just completed my 5 minutes, and I yield my time back to our very charming.
Great points. I think I really like both the points you said. I think I'll circle back to you, Datuk. That brings me to, I think, Paul, I think your thoughts on, yes, man will be the last mile, will be the man. And you have seen as a CSO from other side of the story, and now as a service provider, how do you see the new CSOs in the future will evolve like, or how the whole technology leverage is going to be in the coming years to come?
Thanks, Pawan. Well, I think technology, of course, is like what William mentioned. I agree with him. Is essential, and it's probably the new norm, going to be the new norm itself. In Singapore, specifically, if you look at it, the government has been getting businesses to actually move towards technology and digitalizing. They even prepared grants and made it available for people, for service providers like ourselves, right? And as a service provider, in order for us to stay ahead, we need to embrace this change, because the change will come eventually. And if we don't do, if we don't embrace it, then of course we're going to be left behind, right? Especially countries where you talk about physical security, as a buyer of security previously, right? Of course, there is always the pressure of costs, right? The businesses, management, they want to look at how we cut costs, especially now with COVID. Also, business are not doing that well. There's going to be this pressure coming down, and of course, from a service provider, we see that there's this high cost of labor, particularly in Singapore and some other countries. So we need to explore the various technology-based solutions where we can enhance efficiency and, of course, reduce costs, right? And of course, if you look at that, I think Dex is going to be talking about this in Singapore per se. When you look at manpower, there is this push within the government and government-linked companies where they are looking at performance-based sourcing rather than cost-based sourcing, right? But of course, Dex will elaborate more on that part there, right? And we also start looking at more on how we can look at using things like facial recognition, video analytics to do monitoring, okay? And of course, this all comes in later on, like you also have your AI technology where you use for your monitoring stations, your tracking, and even using data analytics. I think the latest part of things that which is coming up is actually looking at robots, how we can use and partner up to do surveillance and even and those are things that are being really on the ground being tested, similar to drones. So, but of course, as we tech up, okay, and we digitalize, okay, there is also opening ourselves to another area of risk that we also need to look at, and that's of course the cyber part of things, right? Cyber security will be a whole new other risk that we need to kind of look out for. But I think the other speaker will also be talking about that, right? Then the other thing is finding the right standards, right? Like we have supply chain, we have TAPA. I think in the technology side, we have ISO 27001. But again, these standards, technology has been moving so fast, right? And these standards are not really being able to upkeep with the quick changes, right? So those are other things that we also need to look at what are the relevant standards out there.
Great. I think thanks, Paul. I like that point of the first point of, yes, it is to be more holistic. Security will be underlying, and I like the point of that performance-based security also. That will change the entire dynamic of the way we are using security or we are providing security in the industry. I think I like the point which you said about the risks which are using technology. I was reading one of the articles which says human beings may actually have by 2030 actual relationships with robots, not with human beings. So your spouses, your girlfriend, boyfriend might be robots. So I think that is what that is a world which we are going towards. Yes, it sounds scary, but yes, that is where and when I see my kids, they are more attached to their gadgets than actually their real friends, I think, and we are seeing those telltale signs of that happening on that thing. Great insights. I think I'll move on to Henry from here. I think you've spoken about usage advantages, yes, all know, but I think from your perspective, a more holistic approach towards security and cyber resilience when we talk about in this thing. So what are your views on that?
Yes, thank you, Pawan. Right. On my role, I'm focused more on the risk and resiliency portion. So I think before the COVID-19, or in most of us actually before crisis really happened, we find that it's a extra activity that we always, when we need to ask by the board to raise the risk or to prepare the business continuity. And a lot of us actually will need to encourage the user to plan for resiliency and BCP, we always to tell them, say, just in case. And interestingly, with the COVID-19 outbreak globally on the pandemic itself, a lot of users now really understand that it's not just in case problem, but it really will happen. And when you strike you, and then if you are ready or you're not ready, it's very obvious. There's no such thing that I can talk my way out, or I can just get the thing covered up as long as the auditor do not find it, or the ISO regulation didn't check on that portion, right? So I've been doing this for the last 20 years, right? Only the time that I really realized that I'm have a lot of friends and I have some famous in the industry is actually when the first time is when the 911 that strike, and then followed by the SARS happened, and this round when the COVID happened, everybody will say that we should have this thing in place in advance, right? Early of this year, when we just crossed to 2021, I did some of this analyzing what are the risks and the resilience we need to work on for 2021. And because it takes a while for me to present the entire paper, if I can just summarize it in the next 2 minutes itself for the panel. The first thing that what we're looking at in this going forward is that definitely we will still actually hustle or trouble by the COVID-19, the follow-up activity, right? There's vaccine, but then you're going to see have turning through and up and down, that some of the mutation, the vaccine may not be effective. Certain vaccine may actually need some booster after 6 months or after a year. So all this activity will continue to happen. And the mutation that I think have in the UK, in the South Africa, and now the latest one in the Brazil will continue to trouble us, right? The government and subsidization from the different country, it will start to see an end to it, because the government cannot endlessly actually doing that. And to more related to the cybersecurity and the security perspective, you expect that actually more of those terrorist activity, unrest, protests to be happen because of unhappiness in the society itself that actually happen. Cybersecurity, cyber attack itself is already increased. We don't need to wait for it. In the 2020, we see the statistic, spam mail, spam call, and the hacking activity is actually significantly increased. Of course, sometimes we joke about it. It's probably the IT people that jobless, and then they start to turn to become hacker. But on the other prospect, in today, it's so easy to learn how to do hacking, right? You just need to start Googling and put in some effort. You can hack a website so easily. You can deframe a web page or the Facebook itself so easily. And the ransomware and those things all come by. So in cybersecurity prospect, we will realize is that there's more and more of this activity, and some of them may turn into because of financial benefiting them. Start hacking on some database and start selling it for some of the buyer on the internet. So cybersecurity, that perspective, I think that will be something going to be have a big trouble to all of us. And significantly is that we move a lot of activity to work from home because of COVID-19, be it that your infrastructure is ready or not ready. That also introduce some of the risk to the organization, right? Trading and a lot of financial activity previously wasn't allowed to do off-premise. Regulation may be loosened because of during the COVID-19 times. It's allowed some business activity, digital signature to go ahead. So that all contribute to the cybersecurity important and the vulnerability of it. So that is basically what my take, that risk and resilience perspective will be focused more on the terrorism, nature disaster, and cybersecurity in this coming year itself. That will be actually our business need to work on. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Yes, cybersecurity resilience, I think it has been spoken many times. I've heard this statement from many cybersecurity professionals. There are only two kinds of company which exist in the world. One, who are aware of that they have been hacked. Second, who don't know that they have been hacked. But essentially everybody is hacked. So I think that is a better way to start about cybersecurity. Otherwise, we may get complacent on that. So that brings me to the next point towards DEX. So yes, cybersecurity is, when we say all kinds of frameworks of risk management, it's very, very difficult to get a grip around it. So where do we start? Do we have a framework where we can start with, or how do we take our baby steps first and go to mitigating this enormous risk which we are seeing on that?
Okay, thank you, Pawan. So I'm going to share this in two parts. The first part, I will share this
using a SWOT analysis. Then I will share two approaches. So firstly, when we look at the SWOT analysis, we are talking about the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So when we talk about threats, there are so many threats, terrorism, COVID-19, and of course, now we also talk about technology. So technology itself can be a threat to organizations because some company will use this as a competitive advantage over another. And at the same time, we can look at technologies as an opportunity. So if you do it right and you make use, leverage on the technologies, now there's an advent of so many technologies like AI, machine learning, deep learning, even 5G. If you use it correctly, it becomes an opportunity. So whether it's a threat or opportunity, and it depends on how we turn it into advantage. If it's become an advantage, it will then become a strength for the organization. And if it's not used correctly, then it becomes a weakness for the organizations. So that's a quick analysis of this technology risk using this SWOT, SWOT. Then there's two approaches I would like to share with the audience here. One is on a global perspective, which is where I came from, the ASIS International, where we have this initiative called the Enterprise Security Risk Management. I'm quite sure some of you have already heard about that. So in the last few years, ASIS has been promoting about this program about ESRM. The thing is, every organizations have got many verticals of security. So example, we have got physical security, personnel security, information security, cyber security. There are so many pillars of security. And many of these departments or pillars will work in silos. And the way forward is to look at the organization's security as an enterprise security. And how do we bring that together specifically from the angle of security? We have this enterprise security risk management. And within each of these pillars, of course, there are technologies, components, technology solutions. So when we put them through this ESRM, when we look at the risk, we will be able to come up with a collaborative solution to address the technology risk for the organizations. So I thought this is a good approach for organizations to move forward in terms of addressing the technology risk for the year forward. And looking at the local context from a Singapore context, so this is something which earlier Paul has mentioned about these key performance things. Now in Singapore, we call it the outcome-based security contract, or in short, OBC. So OBC is not really new. It has been in the industry, in other industry for many years. Basically, the idea is to get, when we call for a contract, any form of contract, we put the outcome at the forefront, and when the vendor comes in, we specify the outcome, the vendor will have to propose solutions that can address all this. So when we adopt it in Singapore for the security industry, we call it outcome-based security contract. We specify the particular outcomes that the buyer wants. So for example, when we say we want to have zero intrusion, zero unauthorized entry. So how do you address that? So the vendor will then come in to bring in all the various pillars, solutions, for example, manpower, technologies, processes, instead of just bringing in a technology alone. So here we are talking about integration, convergence of solutions and bringing it to the customer. So OBC is something which Singapore government has initiated in the last 2 years, and is really slowly been adopted by the organizations over here. And I thought this would be something that other organizations, our friends attending here also can consider. So in summary, I think technology is a double-edged sword. It can be a threat, it can be an opportunity. So if you do it correctly, you will become your strength. If you do it incorrectly, you become your weakness. Back to you, Pawan.
Great. Thanks, Dex. I think that's a concept which you have explained. It's called anti-fragility, which is now very famous. It's basically how do you take advantage during adversity. So the companies which can take advantage during adversity are anti-fragile. So they can, the more problems are there, more they will flourish in that thing. But you need to keep a framework for that. Then only you can do that. I think great point. So coming back, I think circling back to each one of you, just for your maybe closing comments, as I said, of maybe 30 seconds each, what are the takeaways? How does the future looks like? We will start with Datuk, a quick 30 seconds or 45 seconds Key points, what do you think future looks like?
Pawan, I think one of the areas that we need to really focus is the advent of ESG reporting. I think this would have a lot of implication to risk management and of course security. I think in the past, the focus is very much on corporate governance, but moving forward, a lot of the focus of authorities, on regulatory bodies, of exchanges is really on risk management, be they physical, identity theft, industrial espionage, or even intellectual property theft, and of course, cybersecurity and technology security. So those are areas that we should focus more on as ESG become more and more critical and become mandated around the world.
Great, thanks a lot. Paul?
Yeah, I think for me, with the pressures of cost cutting in organizations, I think that's going across the board. While we embrace technology, and we should, because it's essential and that change will come, we always need to remember how we can strike the right balance, and getting that right mix may differ from country to country, regions to regions, or organization to organization. I think that's key to me.
Yes. Thanks a lot. Henry?
Yes, I have 2 points actually in summary. I think number one is a false sense of security, and a lot of the organization feel that we survived the COVID-19 until now, we are okay. We don't need to test it because we are dealing with crisis management, we deal with disaster every day today, which is a false sense of security, because so far, actually, all those incidents are managed by your minister or Ministry of Health and not you as a business. The next phase, when the business come to recovery, the business will put into test. And without the government support and a lot of the initiative from your government and those that start to back off for business to take over on their recovery phase, you will realize that more business that's supposed to go bust last year, without the support now, they start become a supply chain issue and disappear from the supply chain. So that's first point. Second point is that I think just to continue on what I mentioned is that we need to continue to raise the bar of the business continuity and resiliency, including the cybersecurity portion. Constant mindset that the thing will happen and cybersecurity will be breached, rather than think that about just in case. Then you will be ready to deal with the crisis. Thank you, Pawan.
Great, thank you very much. Dex?
Yeah, yes, often been said technology is an enabler of business. So I like to add on that talent, not technology, is a key enabler of an effective security program.
Great, well said, well said. Thank you very much. Great insights. We have many questions. I will request panelists to answer those questions. Just wanted to summarize this panel. I think great inputs. I like the concept of BP and AP, I think before pandemic and after pandemic. But I don't know where does the pandemic stays. Is it going to be 1 month, 1 year, 2 years? We don't know that. But yes, the life is going to be very different, PB and AP. Yes, voice is still the main point. I think that is more authentic compared to text. That is what we need to think about, and the new technologies will focus on voice. Performance-based, both Paul and Dex are focused on outcome-based security contracting. I think it's a great point, because different countries have different maturity levels, so we can use different technologies, we can use mix of manpower, various things can be used. So rather than hiring people, we may be hiring outcome-based contracts, so that might be more effective. Going ahead, yes, ESRM will be a more holistic approach rather than looking at physical security or cyber security in silos. And last but not the least, the right balance, because businesses will be struggling as we come out of pandemic. So people will still not have money. So investing money will be a big challenge. So right balance between security and investment is going to be the key aspects. I think great insights. Thanks a lot. So many points we discussed. I think we had only 40 minutes and we have just taken that. I think we have taken 37 on that. So I think with that, I'll hand it over back to Hima. One request, I think there are many questions. So if panelists do not, if they, what we'll do is we'll formally close the session after the keynote by Rajiv Biswas and the closing remarks by Sam. And that when we can continue with the question answer session till the panelists have time and the people are there to ask questions, we can keep it open. But we can answer them as live also in the chat box also. Hima, back to you. Thanks a lot, all the panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pavan. Like as Pavan said, we are very much on time, but we would request all the panelists who have time to stay on even after we formally close the session, so that many of the questions that have been put up here, because after an interesting discussion, we have a whole lot of questions in the question and answer box. And perhaps if you would like to stay on behind, we can take those questions on live as well. Otherwise, you're welcome to put the responses in the chat box. Coming up next is our next keynote speaker, Rajiv Biswas, alumnus of the London School of Economics and Imperial College London. Rajiv Biswas is the Asia Pacific Chief Economist for IHS Markit. He previously worked for the Commonwealth Secretariat and The Economist, and also as a consultant for the UN and Asian Development Bank. So is there going to be a vaccine-powered strengthening of economic activity later in the year? Is the strength of recovery projected going to vary significantly across countries depending on access to, medical interventions, effectiveness of policy support, exposure to cross-country spillovers? Let's see what Rajiv has to say on the APAC Global Economic Outlook for 2021. So over to you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you and see you clearly. Thank you, Rajiv. You're good.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you today. I would like to just start with a quick summary of our forecast, which is based on our global economic model of the world economy. And we update this forecast every month. So the latest numbers I'm giving you were just produced a couple of weeks ago. And our view for 2021 is that we do expect the world economy to stage quite an impressive recovery compared to the recession of 2020. In 2020, the world suffered its worst recession for many decades. In fact, ever since the Great Depression, during peacetime, the world hasn't seen that kind of severe economic shock. Even the global financial crisis was not as severe as what happened in 2020. So what we expect in 21 is quite a rebound with world growth of about 4.4%. And we expect the US to be growing at that kind of rate, about 4% growth this year. Eurozone growing at about 3.5%. China, because it hasn't really been in a wave of a pandemic recently, we expect to be growing very, very strongly at about 7.5% this year. And India staging a very strong recovery, growing at 8.9% this year. And a lot of our work, apart from our modeling of the world economy, is also reflecting the surveys that we do every month of industry in manufacturing and services all around the world. And the latest survey results for the month of December are showing a very strong improvement in economic momentum in India, also in China, and also for the US economy. So these numbers that I'm mentioning to you are quite well grounded in the actual economic evidence that we're seeing right now. But of course, a lot will depend on vaccines. So our forecasts are very much based on the assumption that the vaccine rollout will continue, and particularly the big economies, so North America, Europe, China, India, and also Japan will make a lot of progress towards vaccine rollout by the third quarter of this year. It may not be complete, but it will be substantial. And that is a key premise. Now that creates a lot of uncertainties because, of course, there have been new strains, particularly there's a lot of concern about the South African strain. And I think that creates a lot of risk because the Moderna vaccine, the Moderna themselves have said that their original vaccine is not that effective against the South African strain. However, the South African strain hasn't spread significantly in Europe or the US so far. So one important factor is that even though the Moderna vaccine may not be working so well against that strain has not yet spread widely. And of course, there's a lot of travel restrictions to prevent it spreading. And the good news is that Moderna has developed an alternative vaccine. And so this alternative vaccine is now going to be trialed and hopefully will be successful. So I think, I don't have time to go into great detail about individual countries, but I think in summary, we do expect the Asia Pacific region to be growing at about 5.7% this year. So a pretty good story in terms of recovery this year, world growing at 4.4%. But I would also characterize it as a year of uncertainty where there's still a lot of unknowns about how the vaccines will roll out, and also how much some developing countries will actually have access to vaccines, because many countries still don't have contracts.
You want me to tap out 7 something, or you want Chewe tap out now?
So let me stop there.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to interrupt for a second. May
Thank
I
you
request
so much for
everyone
your
to
attention.
just mute themselves, please. Sorry, Rajiv. There was a little bit of interruption in the background here. Can I just request everyone to mute themselves at this point? Thank you. Rajiv, back to you. I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Well, I think we'll just conclude on that note, and maybe just say a word about the risks to the outlook. So, based on that view, I think the key risks are that there could be some, uncertainty regarding. Yeah, I think there's a lot of interference happening right now. So maybe I'll just stop there.
So maybe it's time for me to outshout now. Anybody who is ready. So Hima, I think I will just in the interest of time, I will just take over from now and just deliver my 5 minutes of closing remarks. And so I've tried to note down as fast as I could, but I would probably miss out more points than I will cover. So in summary, we have had 2 outstanding keynotes, an excellent demo by Radhika, and we have had 3 fascinating panels. So big thank you to all the speakers, panelists, and to the wonderful participants. I think around 300 have come in, some logged in, logged out. At peak, we had about 240 to 45 people. So that's a good turnout. And so thank you. You came in from around 12 time zones and 18 countries. So, some people have logged in after midnight. Some have, like Professor Martin Gill, have come in very early in the morning. So big thank you to everyone. So our gratitude and special thanks to all our partners, Black Pearl, Concord Consulting, Enbridge, Global Association of Corporate Services, GACS, SR Group, the Outstanding Security Performance Awards, the OSPAS, and Vector Risk Management. So I'll try to summarize the whole discussion in my allotted 5 minutes. So let's start with, throughout much of human history, I think Asia was the preeminent global power. So Asia's rise, which began with Japan's post-war economic miracle and China assuming leadership at the turn of the century. So that seems to be probably getting accelerated. So even as the US, UK, and other parts of the world struggle with second and third waves and new strains of virus, Asia seems to be rebounding better. And Rajiv has given out those figures, 5.7% growth for APAC. And so thank you for the note of optimism. And Chinese and Indian economies being the most impressive at 7.5 and 8.9%. On the first panel, the world seems to be in a geopolitical recession. So America has a new president, still presiding over the old America, and Bruce McIndoe laid out the 3-pronged strategy: contain COVID, fix the economy, and heal the social divisions. I think in the Biden administration, there will be modicum of continuity as regards as Asia is concerned, but its approach to climate, multilateralism, and alliances, and a good old ways of diplomacy, that will probably come in. Asia will probably still remain at the heart of competing ambitions between US, which would want to maintain its global preeminence, and China, which wants to secure preeminence, at least in the Indo-Pacific, if not in the world. So Biden probably may go in for constraint on economy and technology, but simultaneously engage on other issues like climate change, etc. And so that may be a pragmatic approach. The geopolitics of technology will probably get more fascinating and more fierce. South Asia will probably, as Glenn kind of hinted, and he said emphatically about Indonesia, South Asia would not like to make a choice between US or China. ASEAN will probably not want to lean one way or the other. Their interests could probably be best secured by a stable balance between US and China in Asia. In Asia, among the two largest countries, China and India, I think the most visible engagement of India with China seems to be disengagement, both on the military as well as on the economic front. RCEP has already become the world's largest trading bloc, and India will perhaps have to shed her lone messenger in Rome and learn to work in coalitions. India's strong partnership with ASEAN, Japan, Australia, and the US would be probably a critical part of the strategic equilibrium in the Indo-Pacific. I think over the next 10 years, the highest risks for Asia-Pacific, the highest impact risks, and the world at large are going to be infectious disease, climate action failure, environmental risks, weapons of mass destruction, livelihood crisis, debt crisis, and some probably catastrophic critical information infrastructure attack or breakdown. Professor Martin Gill and Glenn Gardner re-emphasized that while new risks are here, the old ones are not going away. So we need to kind of face them. Raghav very well brought out, never waste a crisis. One of the panelists said that, we are not safe until each one of us is safe. I think over the near term, the most likely risks are unemployment, the livelihood crisis, widespread youth disillusionment, societal and digital inequality, economic stagnation, human-made environmental damage, erosion of social cohesion, crime, terror, and cybersecurity threats. I think economic fragility and social divisions are set to rise, and loss of lives and livelihoods and rising inequality can further accelerate the erosion of social cohesion. I think under disparities in healthcare, education, financial stability, and technology have already led the crisis to impact certain sections of people, those at the bottom of the pyramid more than others. And similarly, COVID hit smaller companies much harder, like Raghav said, and it led to collapse of many micro and small enterprises. This has led to further widening gap between the bigger and the smaller companies, and further reducing market dynamism and exacerbating inequality. And so that is not great from ESG perspective. That's not great for, I think, long-term sustainable development. Even at the stock markets hit the record highs, I think the contrast with the real economy remains stark. I think Rajiv would agree on that. I think climate change still continues to be a catastrophic risk, and climate action failure could lead to both social as well as economic risks in the long term. And the frequency and lethality of extreme weather events is rising, and this has implications for business continuity. Supply chain resilience and reducing overdependence on specific countries became a dominant theme during the pandemic. I think debate on efficiency versus resiliency is not new. This will continue. The pendulum will probably swing towards resiliency during the times of crisis and swing back to efficiency when times are good. I think misinformation remains a challenge, and fake news continues to travel faster than the real. Cyber risks to governments, enterprises, and critical infrastructure, and then both in information and communication infrastructure, as well as online frauds, disinformation, privacy issues. These will be there. Scary when Pawan said that there are only two types of companies, one which have been hacked and don't know they have been hacked, and others who don't know. So I think the balance between convenience, efficiency, and privacy will be difficult to achieve in the cyber domain. There are great perspectives on technology, changing business and changing business models and security models by Datuk William. He said while cyber security will gain prominence, I think the man will still remain relevant. Paul Rashmadi talked about new performance-based security models rather than the cost-based ones. Increased use of video analytics, biometrics, AI, blockchain gaining prominence. My sense is that security and technology have become inseparable. Dex said that technology is a double-edged sword, and then Pawan talked about anti-fragility. So used innovatively, technology is a great boon, and if not, it could cause difficulties. And because technology is moving rapidly and disrupting rapidly, we need new business models. I think COVID-19 logistics and diplomacy will take center stage. Vaccine may accelerate rich-poor divide even among countries, because rich countries pocketed about 51% vaccines here. And in the last time in swine flu, they had pocketed most of the vaccines. So that could probably, and poor countries may have to wait till 23, 24. So India and China, which are mass producers of vaccines, will probably, their role will be critical. I think on vaccine, the focus is firmly on distribution. That is the challenge of shipping, storing, freezing, communicating, vaccinating, of equitable access, of reducing unhealthy competition, of continuing with the, I think, global R&D so that we can have single dose, temperature stable vaccines and vaccines against the new strains. I think there are still uncertainties on how it will roll out. People will say 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and then how, different countries will have probably different time frames for coming back to normal. Asia Pacific region still faces considerable challenges in vaccination programs. due to very large size of population, particularly in countries like India and China. And then Indonesia, Bangladesh, Philippines, Pakistan, Vietnam, Japan will also have very sizable populations. And so Rajiv finally ended that on a very optimistic note, a very good optimistic economic outlook. And bulk of it will depend on how we are able to get hold of the new strains and then when global travel resumes. The countries which have large proportion of global travel, they're still kind of suffering revenue losses vis-a-vis those which have more domestic travel, which has rebounded. I think the central case economic scenario remains positive, as Rajiv said, and world economy seems to be gradually creeping out of recession. So I think lessons from crisis can lead to better pathways to manage risks and enhance resilience. And 6, 7, 8 things. I think we need better analytical frameworks to predict risks, and we need risk champions at all levels, in multilateral organizations, in governments, in corporate sector. We need much more national and international cooperation. We need to improve our communication, explore new norms of PPP. We need performance-based security models and new global standards. The focus on ESG has to improve, and probably we will have to, even as the new challenges, new challenges are coming, the old ones remain, and then talent, not technology, is the key enabler which was brought out. So I think to build back better from COVID-19, we need to prioritize strong international cooperation and institutions, and we need social justice and all the reforms with a human face, as well as strong public-private partnership. So again, I'll start from where I'll end where I started from. Throughout much of human history, Asia was the predominant global power. Global CG may again be reverting to Asia, and Corona may have hastened Asia's relative rise. So Asia's century may finally arrive sooner than expected. So big thank you once again to all the panelists and to nearly 300 of you who logged into Mars 21 from 12 time zones. So deeply value your enthusiastic and lively participation. And we will continue. I will formally close, Hima will formally close, and maybe Jan Sudhesh Sharma can formally close this session, and then we can continue with those who want to stay on and would request panelists to stay on. So have a happy, hopeful, and a great year ahead. So thank you. Back to you, Hima.
Thank you, Colonel Sam. Well, you've already made the closing remarks, but would General Sharma like to say a few words here, sir? General Sharma?
Yeah, I'd like to say a few words. Firstly, thank you very much for a fascinating day. In fact, I learned so much today, and from all the diverse people who have across, like I said, from 18 countries speaking together and understanding from them. We, I think, are a region of Asia Pacific, which has always been resilient. And I think we shall all get out of this much stronger, safer, and better. We've learned a lot, and I think we'll do that better. Thank you for all your insights. And we'll send this to you, all of you, so that we can continue to interact with each other and do so. And MitKat team, thanks all of you to participating in it. Have a great decade ahead, and good luck and good day.
I'll just request all the panelists to switch on their videos. We can just take a quick photograph. If all of you can switch on the videos for a second. Yes, whosoever is there. Thank you.
Radhika, please come in next if you're there.
Big smile from all of you. It has been a long day, but a big smile might be great.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Yeah, Bruce, we need your photo, we need your video, not your photo.
Are you coming in?
Thanks a lot. With that, we'll thanks a lot. All the panelists will formally close the session now, but I think there are many questions. So any panelists who have time, they can spend some time with us, and we would like to answer. The participants can remain logged in and they can ask their questions. Hima, you can start asking, and whosoever wants to answer, we can answer. We don't have to go any panel wise or anything. Anyone, all our experts in various domains, they can answer it on that.
Yeah, so there are about 19 questions in the Q&A box which are remaining. So Hima, if you could just read out the questions very briefly, so whoever wants to can then take it on.
Okay, I'll start with the first question and then go backwards here. So given the uncertainty over COVID, businesses are turning to more and more digital transformation. And given the trend, is it likely to continue to take that path, which has its own share of pitfalls? How do you strike a balance between digital transformation, privacy issues, and cyber-related threats to not only keep the business running, but also enable growth? Who would like to take that question? I think Paul is typing an answer.
No, I think he can join. Probably this is a all comprehensive question. I think we can have another 3 hours of discussion on this. So I think it cuts through all the 3 panels, and I think essentially what he's saying is that we want to listen more from you. Because people didn't get enough of Paul Richmarty and Kenji and Bruce and Martin and probably or Rajiv had a very. So anyone who wants to take this on? Bruce, you want to take it on?
You there?
Yeah, as you said, I'm actually in backup mode. My main internet went down, so I'm, living in a third world country again. Yeah, like you said, it's a very broad issue, and I think it's hard to frame a simple answer. It's a very multi-dimensional problem.
So I think we can come to this question later, and Hima, you can go on to the next one, and then we'll.
Okay. How should we be rethinking risks with more work from home or work at co-working spaces and more parameters which the organizations have lesser control over? Sorry, Sam, you were saying something.
No, I was saying, are you
take that question? I'll take that question. So I think the new concept which is evolving is not about work from home. It is basically work from anywhere. So essentially, you are either trusted or not trusted. The network border has lost its relevance. So the new normal which is coming is the zero trust models. So once a zero trust model, you qualify certain criteria, then it doesn't matter where you are working from. It is working from home, it is working while traveling, whether it is working from your holiday destination, it is not going to matter. So basically, it is going to be a more binary approach, 0 or 1. So if you are inside the premises, inside the network, or you are outside the network, once you are out of the premise, then zero trust networks applies on you, and that's how the whole future is going to be, to simplify the security policies from the cyber side implementation. Otherwise, it is becoming very, very complicated. Whether it is work from home, there are certain policies applicable. If you're traveling, certain policies are applicable. So it is going to be very complicated. So new cybersecurity framework is more about zero trust model. You don't trust anyone unless and until proven otherwise. You have to give certain credentials and you get into the network, so you can work from anywhere. I think that is what is the future is going to be, which is simpler in terms of authentication.
Right. Thanks, Pawan. The next question is on what role does job preparedness and tech skill training play in the COVID world, given the security industry's needs in the coming years vis-a-vis pandemic and the parallel scenario of fresh graduates entering the job market as well?
This is the best one, I think, to answer that.
X is not there. I don't see him. X has left. I think he's not there.
X has left.
Yeah. Sam, you want to take it up because you always like training and upskilling of youngster is the passion for you. So you want to take that up. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think lifelong skilling is going to be the new norm. I think the average shelf life of skills is 5 years. I remember when you were, younger. I still like to believe I'm young now, but again, years back, we used to have one skill and you would probably, that will see you through life. If we joined, we were supposed to have certain skills. Or if somebody joined, that was there throughout life, or if you joined a corporate world. So these days in business world, and I love that statistics, which I'll repeat that if those who have listened, it took telephone 75 years to reach 50 million users. And then it took radio just 38, half of that. And television reached in 13 years. And by the time you came to internet, it was down to 4 years, and Facebook 3 years. Instagram and WhatsApp took a year and a half to reach. And Angry Birds Space App took 35 days and Pokemon Go 19 days. And these days you have apps reaching in 10 days. Rajiv is smiling. So I think the disruption, the pace of disruption is rapid. I think lifelong skilling is the answer. You come in. So I think look at the market forces to the youngsters. I get asked this question very often. So what career do we find? I said, look at 3 things. I think the first most important is market. And market is a function of demand and supply. So wherever demand is, please look towards that. Otherwise, you're like a potato. Okay, no matter how good you are, people will. Okay, the second one is passion. So whatever you're passionate about, go into that. And third is skills. So give highest weightage to market, second highest to passion, and third to skills. So thank you to all of youngsters students who have joined in, and happy to have a conversation thereafter. I'll type in my things. And I'm sure there are, lovely professors and experts here who can probably answer more.
Yeah, thank you, Colonel Sam.
Rajiv, you want to take on anything on skills and, Okay, so
next question, please.
Sam, another thing that you always say is that you're as good as you were yesterday, which means that you got to skill yourself every day and get better and better.
Yeah, right.
Next
Okay, the next question we have is on utilization of AI machine learning techniques for combating cyber threats and analyzing various risks in advance. How does one utilize AI and machine learning for that? Who would like to take on this question?
So, you want to take that?
Pawan?
Okay, I'll do that. So I think AI is not going to be a separate module. Most of the products, if you see, most of the darknet monitoring happening or SIM tools which are there, security incident and event management tools, all the tools are already using AI. So it's not a separate module. So because the way things are happening.
Just request everyone else to go on mute. I think there is some background.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So the way the speed of the amount of data we have, it is humanly impossible to do monitoring. So it is not the most of the monitoring and the rule based the anomaly detection and the way the new intelligence way of breaching which is happening. It is being done by AI currently in most of the products. So it is not a separate module. It is already embedded in most of the products which we have. So it is only about how do you train your AI better. So the more use cases you have, more data you have for the AI to work on, the better responses you are going to get. So currently you get a lot of false positives. As the year progresses, you are going to get more and more better. As the years progresses, you are going to get more and more better results on that thing. But most of the security monitoring products, if you see, are already using AI extensively. So it is not a separate thing, which is there.
And I would second that as well, because where we're going to end up is taking the human out of the loop. We will have attackers that are going to be completely AI driven, a continuous attack surface monitoring, and we must defend against that in AI, real-time machine speed. Humans will not be involved, and that will be the continuous battle very soon.
Absolutely. Well said, Bruce. I think it is going to be robots versus robots, and humans will be collateral damage, I think. In that.
Bruce, there is a question on, I think, darknet, and probably you seem to be the most kind of closest to that. So there is a
heavy increase in activity of darknet. How much intertwining of it with normal activities is being seen today, and what are the challenges to counter it? Bruce, over to you.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the dark.
Can't hear you.
I think Bruce has some challenge with connectivity. Maybe we can go on to the next question and come back to him.
Bruce, are you there? Are you there? Pawan, can you?
Yeah, for some reason I keep getting muted.
No, it's fine.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry. Okay. Yes. So the dark net has been with us for a long time, even before we've even really discussed it. Obviously, criminology and activists and people that want to subvert, kind of the underlying channels of communication thrive in there. That's where they do their work and their commerce. And so it's a continuing challenge. It's very difficult to manage. It's adaptable, it's fungible. And so it's one that we're dealing with now in the United States as antagonists and domestic extremism moves to these channels. Law enforcement is more and more challenged to stay on top of their tactics and objectives. So it's going to be a continuing and growing issue for us across many arenas.
Thanks, Bruce. Hima, we can just take one last question, please. So there is one question. I will just want to take it up. Maybe
I think we have one. Sorry.
Yes, Bruce or somebody wants to answer. Will the technological revolution boost welfare or increase inequality?
Well, near term, yes. Long term, I think it's going to change the nature of how we live. I see, the whole industrial age in the last hundreds of years is really an aberration in how humans live. And I think that the advent of robotics and AI is going to move the human race back to more of an agrarian style living versus industrial age 9 to 5. And we talked about, office is disappearing and we're going to work from anywhere. So in the long term, we're going to see a major restructuring of how we value our lives and what we do with our lives vis-a-vis the last, 300 years.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I think with that, I think we have some question unanswered. We will try to send mails and text on that. We really thank every one of you who has been there till now. I think it's been long, and the special thanks to Bruce. It's middle of the night, so I think real appreciation, really appreciate support from your side. Thanks a lot, everyone who participated today. A great pleasure and honor from our side.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, everybody. And Bruce, nice catching up with you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.
Take care.
Thank you, Pawan, Hima, Sukhil. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen who are still here. So thank you very much. All good things must come to an end. So we'll probably log off. Thank you, Kunal. You can do the honors now.
Kunal, if we can request our panelists and core committee to stay back, the rest can log off.
Sure.